Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, Madame Le Greffier.
Monsieur le Sénateur Farnham. Monsieur le Sénateur Gorst. Monsieur le Sénateur McLean.
Présent.
Madame le Sénateur Lehegara. Monsieur le Sénateur Binet. Madame le Sénateur Miles. Madame le Sénateur Miller.
Présente.
Monsieur le Sénateur Boliak. Madame le Sénateur Kirsten. Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Marie.
Présent.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Brelard. Madame le Connétable de Saint-Hélier.
Présente.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Clément. Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Bonne.
Présent.
Madame le Connétable de la Trinité.
Présente.
Monsieur le Connétable de Gruville.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Sauveur. Madame le Connétable de Saint-Laurent. Madame le Député Labbé.
Présente.
Monsieur le Député Tadier. Madame le Député Dublé. Madame le Député Alves.
Présente.
Monsieur le Député Morel.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Voisin.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Andrews. Madame le Député Binet.
Présente.
Monsieur le Député Coles.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Curtis. Madame le Député Curtis. Madame le Député Feltham.
Présente.
Monsieur le Député Ferry.
Présent.
Madame le Député Jeune. Madame le Député Poré. Monsieur le Député Renouf. Madame le Député Stevenson.
Présente.
Madame le Député Ward.
Présente.
Madame le Député Wilson. Monsieur le Député Carpenter.
Présent.
Madame le Député Gleave.
Présente.
Monsieur le Député Leck. Madame le Député Lee.
Présente.
Madame le Député Maltman.
Présente.
Monsieur le Député Parker.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Raimondo.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Rebendane. Monsieur le Député Romrell.
Présent.
Madame Le Greffier.
Prions Dieu. Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait le ciel et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et la puissance de la terre, pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton Saint-Nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir le cœur et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, et de les conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toutes les délibérations étant accompagnées de ta bénédiction, réussissent au bien et au soulagement du peuple qui te plut de commettre le soin. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite sur la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous induis point en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car toi le règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen. Monsieur le Sénateur Gorst.
Défaut.
Madame le Député Dublé.
Présente.
Monsieur le Député Leck.
Malade.
Jurez que Monsieur le Député Leck est tellement indisposé qu'il ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé.
Oui.
Malade. Les États sont constitués. Moving to the order paper, there are a number of subordinate enactments under B, number of matters presented or laid under C. Deputy Chair, I'll just finish D, then I'll come to you if you don't mind. And under D, the following propositions have been lodged. P60, reduction of excise duty on road fuel, lodged on the 17th of June by Deputy Stevenson. P61, draft sea fisheries minimum size limits amendment regulations, lodged on the 2nd of July by the Minister of the Environment. And P62, take no action on the draft States of Jersey Ministerial Offices Amendment Order, lodged on the 8th of July by Deputy Coles. Deputy Jones.
Hello, sir. I believe a response to my written question, and though we've been in correspondence about 139, I have further concerns about 133, that contravenes Standing Order 12.2a. I don't believe it answers directly my question. It's regarding the financial impact of our 106 2026 transfer, or the order that will be put forward about the transfer, financial impact of the transfer for the Minister for Planning and the Minister for
So that's written question 123.
133.
133. Well, I'll ensure you get a ruling by the time set out in standing orders.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Connotab of St Peter, your light was on? Not anymore. Chief Minister.
Thank you. So in relation to P62, which has been lodged, I was going to ask the Assembly whether they would consider debating that item, of course, with the permission of the proposer himself, given the order paper, sir. If we don't do that, the first item would be to ask the Assembly to appoint a Minister for Planning and Regulation. So I thought, out of respect for the Assembly and the proposition, we should debate that as first item, sir.
So the proposition you make is that P62 be debated now?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Is that seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak on the proposition that we take P62 now?
Sir, could we hear the views of the proposer, please?
It's a matter for him. Deputy Coles?
If it helps, sir, I'm easy whichever way. I'm happy to do it now. I'm happy to do it after questions, however the Assembly feels comfortable.
Well, we only get to questions after we come deal with appointments. Deputy Talia, your light was on momentarily.
Yes, sir. I think I don't remember a situation where we've done propositions before questions, but I may be wrong.
Well, nor do I, but the Assembly's master of its own procedure. So if members vote for it, then it'll happen.
Thank you, sir. I don't know if it's appropriate to speak now or if it's just...
In relation to whether we take P62 first, that's the only thing we're debating now.
Yes, I think we're in danger of setting some worrying precedents just because, for governmental convenience, sir. I think the questions have been tabled. There's an expectation, and certainly it hasn't been any different in my 18 years here, and even longer, I think, for others who've been here before. We do questions first, and then when they're done, we move on to State's business, and I think it's entirely appropriate that this be the first item of business, but it's already a shortened lodging period. So if we were to observe normal protocol, with the 3-week lodging period, this would be debated in September. Everyone would have a chance to properly reflect and consult with our constituents, which we should be doing. It seems to me that government's already rushing this through, and to ask for an extra couple of hours to set a precedent which has never been done before would, I think, be highly unusual.
Deputy Jones.
Thank you, sir. I also have a concern with putting the proposition, this proposition first, because, for example, we have, with questions without notice, we have the Minister for Environment there, and those were the Times and the Chief Minister, both where we could be asking those kind of questions, detailed questions that we need to help us in understanding a bit more about the proposition. I would probably propose that if we seek to do the proposition now, to ask that the appointment for the Minister for Planning and Regulation goes after, so the last point of order of today, rather than the first, so that we do questions first.
Yes, well, if you wish to propose that, you can propose that after this has been dealt with. That's a different proposition, but you can propose that. Does anyone else wish to speak on this matter, whether or not we debate P62 now?
May I seek just a point of clarification? Unless I've misread the order paper, I understood we were going to deal with the appointments before questions.
That's right, yes.
So if we're going to
Are you
deal...
asking me a question or making a
Yes,
speech?
sir.
The order paper is what the order paper is. And it's,
Yes, but what the clarification is, sir, that the appointment of the election of the Minister for Planning and Regulation was due to be the first item.
Yes.
The rationale behind my request is so we give the proposer respect of debating his proposition. Otherwise, sir, I would be minded to sign the order, in which case his proposition
This
wouldn't be able
isn't
to
a
be
point
dealt
of
with.
order, though. You're making it.
I'm just asking for no, sir, a point of clarification. My clarification, it seemed that some members were under the impression we were doing questions first, but we're not.
No, we're not.
Thank you.
Deputy Feltham.
Thank you, sir. I just rise to support what Deputy Tadia said in form of precedent setting. My understanding, and perhaps you can let me know if I'm correct, sir, that it would be precedent setting perhaps to move the proposition now, but what Deputy Jeune has suggested, which would be to move the appointment after the debate on the proposition, wouldn't in fact be setting different precedent to what has happened previously.
You're right. Certainly, it's unusual to deal with a proposition before we have appointments or questions, but the Assembly can determine its own procedure. And as you say, if it's wished, then the election for the new minister in question could be postponed until after questions. That's equally possible as well. Does anyone else? Deputy Voisin.
So I would have thought that if we want to move on with appointing the ministers, then we should deal with this proposition now. It would be illogical, surely, to bypass the election of the Minister for Planning so that we can have a debate about whether we're actually going to create the ministerial role in the first place. Let's have this debate, get it agreed or not, and then we can deal with the appointments.
Does anyone else want to speak on the proposition before the Assembly now, whether or not we determine P62 first? If no one else wishes to speak, I call upon the Chief Minister to reply. Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. I thank members for their comments and reiterate the rationale behind this request was, as Deputy Voisin stated, to deal with this so we can get on with the appointment or otherwise, depending on which way the Assembly votes, sir. So I make the proposition. Ask for the appel, please.
The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting on the proposal to debate P62 now. If all members have had the chance to cast their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. Announce the proposition has been adopted. 36 votes for, 8 votes contra, and 1 abstention.
So could we have the A, please?
Yes.
Those voting contre, Deputies Tadier, Doublé, Alves, Andrews, Feltham, Jeune, Porret and Carpenter.
Deputy Coles, before we begin the debate proper, do you wish to make the proposition under Standing Order 26.7 that the lodging period be reduced to allow P62 to be debated at this sitting?
Yes, please, sir. Do I say a couple of words now?
Yes, if you wish to.
Yes, sir. As the Chief Minister has already highlighted that this would have been a ministerial order that he would have signed and had to enact within 2 weeks. Of course, that 2-week period doesn't allow for proper process to lodge propositions because that does require 3 weeks. And as the Minister alluded to, he could have signed this order, which would mean the debate would have come back in at least 3 sittings' time, so with an annulment request, which is a different debate and a different proposition. At least if we can debate this one today, then we are more flexible with our approach. And so I hope the Assembly can agree that we can shorten the lodging period.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the proposition seconded? Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak on the proposition that the lodging period is reduced? Chief Minister.
Yes, sir. I take on board the point about the 2 weeks for the order, which was within the required notice. So our hands were tied by the timings of the election, the appointment of ministers, and of course the final sitting before the summer recess. And I was keen, sir, to ensure the Council of Ministers was fully constituted before the summer recess, as we need to get on with the work that lies ahead of us. So I hope that provides a useful explanation to members. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Does anyone else wish to speak? Deputy Taddeo.
Thanks, sir. So I'm not sure I will be supporting the vote to reduce the lodging period, because I think this has only been done because Deputy Coles is trying to accommodate already some very bad practice that we're seeing from this Council of Ministers. They've not even been constituted yet properly. They've been voted in the other week. And I think we're getting an attempt here to ride roughshod over procedure. We've seen that already exemplified this morning. And the 2-week lodging period for the ministerial order hasn't even elapsed. Now, what the Chief Minister should have done is that he should have lodged the ministerial order, let it sit over the summer, and allowed Deputy Coles to also have his proposition, which would have sat over the summer, so that there could be proper public scrutiny. The scrutiny panel for environment and housing hasn't even been formed yet. Yet we're actually creating a completely new ministry. So much for small government, of course, but that's a matter for perhaps the main debate, sir. And we expect this Assembly to do its job of proper general scrutiny. So I, for one, am not going to support the lodging period being reduced, even though it's been done by my party colleague for the right reasons, to accommodate a government which clearly does not respect the democratic process and the democratic norms. And quite frankly, a shame on some of those ministers who should know better, who are towing this line from a very early stage.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on the proposition to reduce the lodging period? If no one else wishes to speak, I ask Deputy Coles to reply. Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. I don't really have much to conclude with, but I do hope the Assembly can agree to shorten the lodging period, because I'd rather get this debate out of the way now and allow either the Council Ministers to carry on or them to actually start the work that the debate requires.
Is the appel called for?
Yes, please, sir.
The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce the lodging period has been reduced. 43 votes pour, 4 votes contre.
Can we have the floor, please?
Yes.
Those voting contre, the Conotop of St Saviour and Deputies Taddeo, Andrews and Barbara Ward.
So move on to take no action on the draft States of Jersey Ministerial Officers Amendment Order lodged by Deputy Coles. The main respondent is the Chief Minister, and I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The States are asked to decide whether they are of opinion to request the Chief Minister to take no action to make or enact the draft States of Jersey Ministerial Officers Amendment Order 2000 as appended to the notice under Article 29A3 of the States of Jersey Law 2005, Changes to Ministerial Officers 2026, R106 of 2026, until A report has been presented by the Chief Minister to the States, which includes 1, details of any additional costs and staffing implications of establishing the role of Minister for Planning and Regulation, 2, clarification of the lines of officer accountability to the role of Minister for Planning and Regulation, and whether any of these officers will also be accountable to other ministers, 3, the reasoning behind the transfer of responsibilities for items listed in Schedules 1 and 2 of the amendment order, and an explanation of the alternatives, if any, that were considered. 4, details of any consideration the Chief Minister gave to merging other ministerial roles before creating the position of Minister for Planning and Regulation. And B, the States has debated and voted on the establishment of the role of Minister for Planning and Regulation in light of the information provided within A.
Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. That was a lively start to our first debate in this new Assembly, so I thank everybody for their patience in agreeing that we can take this now. I also will acknowledge that obviously the Chief Minister has produced the Commons paper, but that obviously came in late yesterday, so I haven't really had a chance to prep and plan response to that, so I may do that more in my summing up of this debate, sir. Some members of this Assembly will already know, and those who don't know will probably figure out soon that I am a bit of a stickler for following process. And this is probably why I ended up chairing the Machinery of Government Subcommittee of PPC for the final 2 years of the last Assembly. This subcommittee looked at the Democratic Accountability and Governance Report and recommendations to see how they're being implemented, as well as looking at the machinery of government the machinery of our government and the Assembly, making recommendations and propositions about how we can make improvements. And because of this, my first reaction when hearing the Chief Minister had decided to create a new ministry was the DAGS report. The first recommendation of the DAGS report says that each department should have one minister who is ultimately accountable for the whole of the department, where the scope of the department is such that it is felt that additional ministers are required. There should be a lead minister, a non-com minister, with the responsibility of specific areas of the department. That would mean creating an assistant minister, sir. There have been questions around the Department of Infrastructure and Environment for a while, as it has 2 ministers and 1 chief officer. But of course, the name suggests there's quite clear lines of definition about who is responsible for what area. And it also helps that the Director of Regulation has statutory protections in place should the regulator need to take on the other department. The problem from here is that R106 did not provide the details of how the department structure is going to change to account for the additional minister. Which minister is going to have ultimate accountability? And of course, with the department restructure, the budget will also need to be considered. What staffing and resources will be required? What projects will need to be stopped to allow for the new minister to start to achieve what they want to achieve, sir? And this is before we even start to ask the question around the legislation that will come under what ministerial responsibility. So, when we were in the last Assembly, as in the last meeting of the Assembly, sir, we appointed the Minister for Environment, Senator Mary Lehegira. And in answering a question from Deputy Alex Curtis in relation to the Agricultural Land Sale and Leases Law 1974, the Minister for Environment ended by saying, "But I think it is the Environment Department's remit to ensure that when land is being sold or transferred, that all the rules are applied." Now, sir, I'm sure you probably missed Deputy Rob Ward, but I hope this will help to soften it. So I'm going to paraphrase George Michael, so apologise that it's not Billy Bragg. So, because last sitting, the Chief Minister gave her this law, and the very next day, he took it away, and this sitting, to save some from tears, he's given it to someone he thinks is special. And though, sir, I jest, it does demonstrate the problem. Legislation is being moved from one minister to another, but it had not been communicated before the appointments were made. Sir, R106 also indicates that the responsibility for other legislation is being moved from the remit of sustainable economic development to both the Minister of Environment and the potential new Minister of Planning and Regulation. So this brings into a few questions to my mind. Has all the legislation been considered and discussed before making this decision? It seems that some of this has been a bit rushed and not thought through properly. We have seen that Senator Beaulieu has been given delegated functions already, so there's nothing stopping the Senator starting work already, but as an assistant minister. So then, sir, why not have an assistant minister crossing portfolios with delegated functions? This has clearly been considered with other matters, as Senator Kirsten has delegated functions from around for sport from multiple ministerial portfolios. So why does the new position of Minister for Planning and Regulation have to exist? Sir, the Chief Minister has 12 ministers. There is something quite biblical about that. We'd pray for his sake that he doesn't find out who Judas is within the first couple of years. But sir, that is the potential. So sir, that is 12 potential areas of political accountability, not including the Chief Minister himself, where legislation and portfolios could be redeployed to deliver on the common strategic policy. Maybe part of the issue lies in standing orders, and maybe it's in the States of Jersey law. Maybe it's something to whoever chairs the Machinery of Government subcommittee will consider in this term, perhaps. But I simply do not understand the rush to create this position. So it is not clear why this is necessary. It is not clear why it is okay for one remit to be covered by an assistant minister, but another needs to be a minister. I think it's best that we address a question that some may be thinking, that why didn't I question the Chief Minister in the last term when he decided to split education and children? Well, sir, the Care Inquiry recommended that a children's minister should be created, and until the split, it was kind of an addition to another portfolio. And given this island's historic failings, we needed to do better for our young people, be that their journey through care, mental health issues, or simply everyday child, to allow that every child has a chance. So when we look back at why the Department of Environment, and therefore the Minister of Environment, was created, and in that creation held the Planning Department, it was to ensure that a balance between our environment and development was maintained. Jersey is a beautiful island, as I'm sure we all agree. The problem with islands, though, sir, especially small ones, is that there is a finite amount of space and land. And we need to balance this space with building homes and appropriate places for businesses of many different types. This challenge gets tougher when one of our main business types on this island is agriculture, so we need farmland. We need to balance our impact on wildlife and ecosystems. I hope everybody is aware to the risk of human life if all bees disappeared. Bees do not exist in isolation, they are part of a wider ecosystem. So it remains unclear to me when the Minister for Environment talks about being a statutory consultee to planning and what this means. So there are many parts of the Environment Department that already act as statutory consultees, from land control to historic environment. This acts to balance the policies of the Bridging Island Plan and the consultees across the island. A new island plan, or at least a review of some of the policies, is needed. But does this need a new minister to achieve that? So I've talked about the connection between environment and planning, but what about regulation, sir? This is an area that definitely needs to be looked into. There has always been concerns around the regulators sitting in government, meant to be holding government to account while being in the same department, under the same chief officer. As under the same chief officer who has the department, who is probably one of the largest pollution risks to this island. So that's not to say that the Department of Infrastructure doesn't do a good job at preventing these issues and controlling them. And as I mentioned earlier, with the Director of Regulation of Statutory Protections, if they need to prosecute, these glass walls are well in place. However, the question of those making the rules are also enforcing the rules. The States of Jersey Police don't do this. If there is a consideration of splitting regulation, why not give wider consideration to splitting the role of rule maker with enforcement? Again, something which R106 doesn't make clear. So Article 26A of the States of Jersey law gives the Chief Minister powers to create ministers, abolish ministers, and make provisions for ministers' functions. But should we, as an Assembly, accept the large and more fundamental changes without prior scrutiny and parliamentary process? The initial report is light on detail. My requests outlined in my proposition are reasonable. With delegated functions, this request does not hold up any work. I urge members to support this proposition to provide clarity to the Assembly and transparency to the public. Sir, I make my proposition.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the proposition seconded? Thank you. Does anyone speak on the proposition? Senator Farnham, Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. I welcome the opportunity to respond to this proposition because it raises an important question about how we organise government to best serve islanders. At its heart, this debate is not about creating another layer of bureaucracy or undertaking a major reorganisation of government. It is about ensuring that ministerial responsibilities reflect the increasing scale, complexity and importance of two distinct areas of public policy. The proposition before us, sir, brought by Deputy Cole, suggests that the creation of a Minister for Planning and Regulation should be delayed until further reports have been prepared. The Council of Ministers do not believe that this is necessary, and I therefore ask members to reject the proposition. So the proposition to create the new ministry has followed the statutory process set out in the States of Jersey law. Notice was given on the 29th of June. Members have had the required notice period. The proposed amendment order has been published together with the legislation affected. And members can retain their established powers under the legislation law, should they wish, to challenge the order once made. This process, there is neither new nor exceptional. Indeed, it is precisely, as the Deputy alluded to, the same process that was followed when the Office of Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning was created in 2024. Then, sir, we had 4 weeks, I think, because of the timing of the change of government and the dates for the established Assembly sittings. This, we only have 2 weeks. Planning and environmental protection have evolved significantly over recent years. Planning today is central to delivering many of the priorities islanders have asked us to address. It was a key and regular topic for discussion during the recent election, sir. Because it influences the delivery of homes, it influences our infrastructure, business confidence, investment right across the community. It influences economic growth. At the same time, the environmental portfolio has expanded considerably. It now encompasses biodiversity, biosecurity, agriculture, fisheries, marine resources, climate adaptation, water and air quality, PFAS, monitoring and scientific oversight, countryside management, sir, Jersey Met, animal welfare and veterinary services, our natural heritage, and importantly, sir, excuse me, very importantly, our international environmental responsibilities. These are each substantial portfolios in their own right. The Council of Ministers therefore believes that they each require dedicated ministerial leadership. I refer, sir, to a proposition brought by the then Deputy Paul Leclerc in 2009 that actually asked the Assembly to consider splitting the roles of ministers for similar reasons, but also the inference there, sir, was that planning was advantaged in the joint roles as they were then, sir, and the environment were disadvantaged. Now it seems to be the other way around. It seems that members, the proposer may think that, and others may think, and public discourse in certain areas may think that the environment will be disadvantaged now, so which is not the case, as I will explain. It doesn't weaken environmental protection, so I believe exactly the opposite. For many years, successive ministers have carried responsibility for both planning and the environment within a single portfolio. I believe separating these two responsibilities provide greater clarity, greater transparency, and stronger democratic accountability. It allows the Minister for Environment to devote her full attention to the increasingly complex environmental challenges facing our island. Equally, a dedicated Minister for Planning and Regulation will be able to focus fully on improving the planning service. Members will know that planning is often cited by islanders and businesses alike as an area where we need to improve. We need to reduce unnecessary delays. We need to modernise the regulation. We need to improve customer service and make the whole process less expensive for islanders and businesses. I would also like to confirm that there are no additional resource implications arising from the establishment of this ministerial officer, or at least none we can establish at this time. And of course, I would remind members we will have the budget process coming up in the near future. And if there are to be any changes, sir, we can deal with that during that process, sir, but officials do not anticipate that currently. No new department is being created. No new directorate is being established. The existing organisational structure remains exactly as it is today, sir. But what does change is the political accountability, which becomes clearer. The proposition also asks about officer accountability. Again, the answer, sir, is straightforward. The proposal aligns ministerial responsibility with the department's existing operational arrangements. It does not reorganise the department. It simply provides two ministers with clearly defined responsibilities, each accountable to this Assembly for their respective portfolios. The transfer of legislation has similarly been approached on a logical basis. Legislation has been allocated according to function. Legislation relating to planning and wider regulatory responsibilities sits with the Minister for Planning and Regulation. Legislation concerning the natural environment, agriculture, fisheries and environmental protection will remain with the Minister for the Environment, sir. Attached to the comment, sir, I have appended a list of all the legislation, all the pieces of legislation that will sit within the relative ministry, so if approved by this Assembly. The proposer asks whether the ministerial structures were considered. The answer is yes. Every incoming government and Chief Minister, sir, reviews and applies careful thought to ministerial portfolios. That has happened under successive administrations since ministerial government was introduced in 2005. From time to time, new ministerial offices have been created because priorities have changed. External relations, for example, international development, children and families, education and lifelong learning. Each reflected changing circumstances and the need, sir, at the time for greater ministerial focus. Following careful consideration, sir, Council Ministers concluded that separating planning and regulation from environment represented the most effective governance arrangement. Conversely, we did not consider it appropriate to merge the remaining environmental responsibilities with the Sustainable Economic Development Department, as also mentioned by the Deputy, because both are major portfolios and both require dedicated leadership. To combine them would dilute ministerial focus rather than strengthen it. So ultimately, this debate comes down to one simple question. Do we believe government works better when ministers have clear, manageable and accountable portfolios? I believe it does, sir. As government has evolved, planning, regulation and environmental responsibilities have grown considerably in both breadth and complexity. This proposal is therefore not about creating more government, it is about creating better government. It strengthens environmental leadership. It strengthens planning performance. It improves accountability. It supports sustainable economic growth. It will provide clearer ministerial focus. And it does so, sir, without reorganising the department or creating additional resource implications. In closing, sir, I would like to confirm to members that I firmly believe this is a measured and proportionate evolution of our ministerial structure. It reflects recognised principles of good governance and ministerial accountability. And for those reasons, sir, I ask members to reject P62 and allow the creation of the Minister for Planning and Regulation so that both Ministers for Planning and the Environment can begin the important work for which they have been selected. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Deputy Jones.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I support Deputy Cole's proposition. This is not a proposition against the principle of a Minister for Planning and Regulation. It is a proposition that says, before we make this permanent, show us the workings. That is a reasonable thing for this Assembly, I think, to ask. We must remember as a starting point that if Deputy Coles had not brought this proposition, we would not have the level of detail we have in front of us in the comments paper. Yet the Minister for Planning's role has substantially changed since R106 was published, and I would say there are still very much unanswered questions and details to be had. I have concerns to the answers I was given in my written questions, written question 133 and written question 139, which tried to dig deeper into the analysis behind the split, as all we have is R103 and R109. This was as Chair of Scrutiny because my panel has not been formed, and therefore I cannot write specific questions to the Chief Minister, letters to the Chief Minister or to the Minister of Environment to understand in detail further what is happening. And therefore I had to write written questions, and I believe those answers were not comprehensive enough. So I would invite members, if they haven't seen the answers for themselves, to see the little content of the answers that were given to me. Yet since R106 was published, as I've just spoken about, the scope of the transfer has changed significantly. The Chief Minister says in his speech just now that the members had time to review this, but I would question, when did we have time? We had R106, yes, but only yesterday, about 4 o'clock, did we actually see the final divisions between the laws and also a little bit more information behind that. That is very, very little time to do any analysis or be able to ask any further questions on that. For example, in detail, 8 pieces of legislation have been pulled back from the transfer to planning and regulation that was mentioned in R106. And now they will now stay with the environment. That's 8 pieces of legislation, and not little legislation. These are quite substantial legislation. For example, as Deputy Coles has already said, the agricultural land, control of sales and leases, the protection of agricultural land, pesticides, the plant health, weeds law, EU legislation, export of flowers and potatoes. Those were all considered in R106 to be important enough to give to the Minister for Planning and Regulation. Now they've changed, and now it will be back with the Minister of Environment. This is essentially the entire agricultural and biosecurity block reversed between when we received the report and the finals comment paper, which again, I might add that if we hadn't got this proposition, we would not know that, and we would be going into supporting the Planning Minister appointment without actually knowing that those 8 substantial laws have been pulled back and actually staying with the Environment Minister. I'm not saying that the analysis of whether it was right or wrong, depending on which for myself, but I would like to understand why it was deemed necessary to give the Planning and Regulation Minister those specific laws, and what analysis was done behind that when that split was first given, and then now what is the analysis now for why that law is now left with the Environment Minister. What is the workings and that evidence-based scrutiny behind understanding those split? The legislation says, and this was said in the report, that the allocation was the nature of the function it governs, and I know the Chief Minister has already said this in his speech. So why then, again, was this analysis of the nature of the functions it governs sound in June, but has changed substantially a few weeks later? On the discrepancy, I also raised a few weeks ago that there was actually a discrepancy between Report 106 and Report 109, which set up the Senator Boliat's position as Assistant Minister to the Environment Minister. And at least that has now been resolved. This included the water law, water pollution law and water resources. This will all now stay with the environment, and I welcome that clarity, and this means, of course, the Environment Minister will work on PFAS as a priority. But again, this gives example of that there seemed to be no evidence-based analysis behind the split, because we saw that there were 3 laws that had been assigned to the Assistant Minister, but then fell away and was not going to be assigned to the Minister for Planning and Regulation, and now, of course, they all have changed again. But I would say not only of these two, there's so many answers, so many questions to the split, and trying to get information behind why there is a split because of these changes that happened. And again, we would not know that if we didn't have the comments paper. There are still no answers specifically about the overlapping functions, especially around enforcement. Who has final responsibility, especially when it comes to contaminated land or water pollution or breaking the wildlife law? There is very little information about how enforcement will work and that overall accountability. And I want to give an example. The Waste Management Law of 2005, that law that governs licensing of waste sites and the polluter pays cost principle for waste-related pollution, has been transferred to the Minister for Planning and Regulation. But the water pollution law, water resources law and water law all remain with the Minister for Environment. If contaminated waste from a site regulated under one law reaches water regulated under another law, which minister leads? The answer I have been given with my written question is that the ministers and officials will work together as it's routinely done. But I don't believe this is good enough when two relevant laws now sit in different departments. I want to know, for scrutiny's sake, which minister will lead enforcement action where contamination from a licensed waste site under the former is found to affect water quality regulated under the latter. These are the kind of questions that I think we should be going to the crux of before we decide about the split.
So would the member give way for a point of clarification?
Yes.
Of course. Yes.
Does she think that these questions might be helpfully answered by the Attorney General during the course of this debate? And if so, would she be minded to put some of those to him?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to, but at the moment the Attorney General is not here. Ah, fantastic.
So a message could be sent to the Attorney General, Greffier.
So he's back.
Oh, he's back.
From what I've been listening to, these are questions for the Minister. They're not questions for me as to what work is, how the work is divided up between departments. That's not a legal question.
Yes. Have you finished your speech?
No, sir.
All right.
Those, I think, are questions. Therefore, then I would like to hear the Minister of Environment or potential Minister for Planning and Regulation to answer within this debate, would be useful, because I'm sure that they have thought about this and they have talked about this and they would be able to answer my questions.
Sorry, there is one more point of clarification I don't
Are
want
you
to make.
prepared to give way?
Does the member believe that it would be helpful to know what the legal responsibility is and the statutory basis is for whom ultimately the buck stops with?
I think these questions you might want to ask the Attorney yourself, but Deputy Jones, do you want to continue your speech?
Yes, and I think that it would be useful if the Deputy asks the Attorney General himself, those at the end of this. But I think, as we can see, there's a lot of unanswered questions that I would like to get to the bottom of. Also related to funding, and I know the Chief Minister touches on this and also in the comments paper, but within my written question around funding, there is no evidence that the change is generally budget neutral, which was the answer to my question around the budget and how that will work. It was given to me that this is budget neutral. But there is not a clear analysis behind that to understand why it's budget neutral. It's just given as a fact, but without actually giving that explanation further. And that is a question that I've asked the bailiff to rule on further in the next, to be able to come back to me on the written question related to that. But what I would say is that we hear that from the budget for 2027, we will then have a split of separate heads of expenditure for the first time. And I actually welcome this, because it will clearly show how little this island currently spends on protecting the environment. It's a figure that is presently hidden within a combined budget. And so I welcome that transparency, because we really will be able to see just how little is actually being spent on on the environment if we take out, of course, the agricultural transfers from the Economic Development Minister. The Chief Minister's written answer said accountability, to my written question, said accountability for international agreements follows the legislation. So transferred law, transferred accountability, retained law, retained accountability. And I would like to understand which was not answered, and maybe this is for Deputy Tadier's question to the Attorney General. What are the mechanisms if one minister's responsibility and decisions actively impacts the statutory responsibility of the other? What happens if a planning application was pushed through by the Minister for Planning, but it will have a negative impact on our water quality, our wildlife law, or an impact on international Ramsar sites, for example? I would also like to understand why the Public Health and Safety Rented Dwellings Law has gone to planning and regulation. The entire justification for this specific transfer, the generic sentence says, guided by the nature of the function it governs, but there's no paragraph anywhere addressing why this law, which protects tenants from unsafe housing conditions, sits better with the Planning and Building Control Minister than anywhere connected to housing policy. Why, for example, could that law not have gone to Housing Minister? But as we're splitting up the laws, maybe to answer the Chief Minister's point, if the laws are being split up now, why not think of them in a deeper way than just splitting between the two? And of course, also, a lot of this is also taking a lot from the Sustainable Development Economic Minister as well. So in fact, this split is splitting 3 ministers down, though we're actually focusing now on 2. A lot is actually being taken out of the Economic Development Minister's role as well. The comments paper points to the earlier split of children's services from education as proof that this kind of ministerial reorganisation can be done cleanly. But I think that comparison doesn't hold because that is very specific, distinct statutory function between children and education. But the environment brief is nothing like that in scale. It's much more and is wide-ranging. And all of this has to be enforced. And now that sits within both environment and also, it's very unclear where enforcement sits, and I think Deputy Coles has pointed this out in his speech. What I'm trying to say, and by the interruptions that my speech has generated, is that I think there is a lot of unanswered questions. And I'm not, with this supporting Deputy Cole's proposition, I'm not saying that having a new Minister for Planning and Education is a bad idea, regulation is a bad idea. Members may conclude that at the end this is the right structure, but what we're being asked right now is to let it happen. But what we're being asked to do is let it happen without the costing, the staffing, the accountability lines, the funding assessments, all these questions to be answered clearly by scrutiny as well as consultation, of course, that has been raised already. And so that is a situation where I think we haven't got clarity. And again, as the interruptions show, there has not been clarity with this split. There's not been an assessment done behind the split. There seems to be changes all the time to the split. And I, as Chair of Scrutiny, would welcome the chance for my panel to be able to ask more detailed questions to this restructuring. Because I think at the moment, the written questions that I received was very vague. We had only received the kind of detailed information in the comments paper. If we hadn't had this proposition, again, we would not see this, any of this, and we would just be passing a new minister without any details whatsoever. So I would urge members to this is not about opposing this new ministerial office, but it's simply about giving us time to be able to scrutinise it before the minister has been created. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this proposition? Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. I have sympathy with the Chief Minister here. On the one hand, he wants to act and move, and if he spends too long thinking about things and reporting on things, he'll be seen as being slow. And if he moves too fast and brings something immediately, he'll be thought to have said that things haven't been consulted widely enough and worked on. And I don't really feel that this is necessarily his fault. But I do have sympathy and will be supporting Deputy Coles, largely because I think we're in a position here that was foreseen years ago. It was foreseen 8 years ago that this is where we would end up when the powers under Article 29A are used in the States of Jersey law. The Chief Minister referenced in his speech that forming and moving ministerial offices isn't something new, and it's not. And he quite rightly referenced his use of the powers when he made the Children and Families Minister separating from Education and Lifelong Learning Minister. But the power for the Chief Minister to do that alone only came in with the Machinery of Government Miscellaneous Amendments P1 2018 law. And at the time, the power for the Chief Minister to do this by order was contentious, and in fact it was discussed against. And I turn to the further comments made by the Chairman's then titled Chairman's Committee in relation to the amendments to the States of Jersey law. And one of the largest issues they had was that introducing Article 29A, that is the ability for the Chief Minister to make these changes himself or herself, removes and changes the balance of power away from the Assembly. Paragraph 34 of their further comments say that Article 15 and 16 amend the current provisions to provide the Chief Minister to do this. The current position is that the Chief Minister may move offices from one office to another, subject to approval of the States, and that this would mean that the States Assembly would not be involved in the decision-making to move ministers around, other than after the event through the powers to challenge ministerial orders, quite rightly highlighted by the Chief Minister in his comments using the legislation Jersey law. And what we're seeing now is the issue rising ahead, which is this Assembly not feeling necessarily it's been brought along on that journey. So I give no fault to the Chief Minister for using his powers. He's used the powers he has to use, arguably. It's not necessarily within the States of Jersey law now for him to bring it to the States Assembly as legislation. It's an order-making power. But I do think the fact that these articles were changed in the States of Jersey law are giving rise to changes quicker than needed, and perhaps, or at least changes brought along without the agreement of this Assembly. And I think this government and I think this Assembly will work best over the next 4 years when decisions can be made led from the government and the Assembly hand in hand, agreeing where the best change is. And I feel I agree with paragraph 41 of those further comments, which in essence said the panel is concerned that there has not been sufficient consultation with States members as a whole, nor has a panel been given sufficient time to consider the impact of the changes, and they recommended that Articles 15 and 16 of the amendment, which now refer to Articles 29 and 29A, be withdrawn or otherwise rejected by the States. And I think we would be in a better place if the former process was still in place. I appreciate the Chief Minister is using his powers as they are in the law, but I think we as an Assembly should consider reverting to a pre-2018 position on this, so that the next time a shuffle, or as the Chief Minister rightly says, the Council must adapt to the changing demands of the portfolios of ministers, it is done with this Assembly agreeing it, scrutinising proactively, not reactively, and so I will support this, but I will urge the Chief Minister to consider amending the States of Jersey law to ensure that actually perhaps the powers sit back with the States Assembly. Still the Chief Minister to bring that, to lead the charge, to design the Council of Ministers best fit to deliver on the agenda of the Council. But I feel we're in this position not because of any one person, but ultimately because the changes to the law are now kind of bearing fruit. The one last comment I would make, I'm not going to comment about the suitability of portfolios. Personally, I see some real benefit, and I've been quite excited to think about how a dedicated regulation minister can champion appropriate and proportionate regulation. And it's a very exciting place to think about consolidating non-planning regulation, actually, the stuff that hasn't been necessarily mentioned. But I turn to page 3 of the Chief Minister's comments on P62. And they state the same minister, this is under the title Better Governance, the same minister is responsible for promoting development, protecting the environment, preparing planning policy, and for determining planning applications. And then it concludes, separating these responsibilities creates greater transparency and provides clearer checks and balances within government decision making, and it reflects good governance. what I would say, sir, is I don't believe what's being proposed today does change that. And I believe that it is still the joint responsibility of ministers to, most importantly, protect the environment. And I say that because we have to go to one of the larger laws being transferred to the Minister for Planning and Regulation, which is a planning and building law. And I will point back just briefly to the purpose of the law, Article 2. And the law is there to conserve, protect and improve Jersey's natural beauty, natural resources and general amenities, its character and its physical and natural environments. And in that paragraph, the reference is to natural resources, includes biodiversity, and the natural environment of Jersey includes a natural environment around Jersey. So it will still very much be the responsibility of the Minister for Planning, not to listen to the Minister of Environment and how to protect the environment, but to be the custodian himself or herself, whoever's appointed following this. So I say this, I think the Chief Minister is in a bind, given he did use his powers quite rightly in the law. He hasn't done anything wrong at all, but I do still think it would be best to revisit Article 29 and 29A of the main States of Jersey law, so future decisions can be led by the Chief Minister, but then ratified by the States Assembly proactively. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. And I'm really grateful to follow Deputy Alex Curtis because he made some additional points which I'm going to build on. And I think he was absolutely right to point out the P1 in 2018, because I was actually looking back further than that and looking at Clothier in the year 2000. And if we are to go back to the foundational principles of the system of ministerial government that we have, and the Clothier report said that the scrutiny role is absolutely vital to the balanced machinery of government in this system. And I do think that it's perhaps a quirk of the legislation and standing orders that we have that govern how our assembly works, that actually the chair of scrutiny isn't able to call this in, because if it were legislation, she would be able to do so. And I think that members should be mindful of the principles and the good governance that I believe would be appropriate around this. And even though it's not written into the standing orders, into the legislation, I think that the principle should still stand. And when I was listening to the whole of the speech made by the chair of the scrutiny panel, she raised so many questions, more questions than I myself had thought of. And that indeed is the function of scrutiny, is it not? To raise every single question and to explore every avenue and to raise questions on our behalf to a level of detail that we couldn't possibly do as individuals. So I would like to let that function see it run its course. I think it's reasonable. I think that Deputy Coles has brought forward a very reasonable and moderate proposition today, because it's not going to delay any work, because in fact the proposed minister is perfectly able to carry out those functions as an assistant minister, so it's not actually going to delay anything, and I think that it would support the balance in our assembly, and that's something that's very important to me, sir, and I know is and should be important to all members, is having that balance between the executive and the non-executive. So I will be supporting the Deputy Coles's proposition today, and mindful of what Deputy Alex Curtis has raised, I do think that PPC should explore this and consider it, and to see if any changes should be made.
Thank you, Deputy. Conataba St Martin.
Thank you, sir. Deputies Jearn, Deputy Alex Curtis and others have spoken very eloquently and laid out very clearly why they're supporting Deputy Coles's proposition. And before we go to the vote, I want to clarify that I'm not against the principle at all, and I'm not against Senator Bolliett becoming a minister, but I am against this sort of unholy rush that we seem to be having. Sorry, I've only just written it, and I've got some on here. So Proposition P62 does not seek to permanently block the Chief Minister's vision, and nor does it debate the merits of a dedicated planning role. It simply enforces a necessary pause. It asks that we hit the brakes, demand a fully costed business case, and ensure that any major change to our ministerial offices is properly debated and voted on by this Assembly, rather than being pushed through via a ministerial order. And before we reorganise the machinery of government, we must understand the financial and operational consequences. I urge all members of this Assembly to support Proposition P62, to stand up for proper parliamentary scrutiny, and to protect the public purse. Thank you.
Thank you, Conor Tarp. Does anyone else wish to speak on this proposition? Deputy Taddeo.
Thanks, sir. I think we're playing a bit of itchy trigger fingers today, sir, so I can see some ministers earnestly scribbling notes, but they may, of course, be notes to do with something else. But let's see if we can smoke some of them out, perhaps, if they do want to speak, because we're hearing remarkably little from ministers on this as to why it's a good idea. So let's start off, first of all, with the current Minister for Infrastructure, my St Brelard colleague. I noticed that in 2022, in his manifesto, one of his headline policies was that planning and environment should be split. He was, of course, in that role for 2 years, and he was in the Assembly for 4 years. He didn't bring that proposition. I'd like to know whether he thinks it's still a good idea, whether he has concerns. He's been known as a strong champion for the environment. I noticed that one of his proposers or nominators in St Brelard is a very well-established former deputy who has been a strong champion for the environment, and he has published a letter in the JEP in the last few weeks advising strong caution against this move, saying that he doesn't think it's the right way to be going about things, and it's certainly rushed. And he made a very compelling case actually about why the functions were put together in the first place. So to say that the question is settled politically is, I think, not true. There are some very strong advocates over and above that who have made overtures in the public domain from groups such as Friends of the Earth, but also more locally based groups advising caution, saying that we shouldn't proceed with this today. And the words that I heard actually during the election is that whilst there was very much, I believe, a manufactured discourse from some of the candidates running that they wanted to deregulate and be pro-business and cut red tape. Actually, what I was hearing on the doorsteps in St Brelard was a much more nuanced position, saying that people were looking at the environment and they very much valued the coastline, they very much valued the national park, that they didn't want undue development in what's increasingly becoming an urban area of Llanelvey and around, and I think that's true around the island. So I'm concerned that actually the Council of Ministers is moving very quickly here to try and resolve a problem which they've identified, which has probably been misdiagnosed in the first place, and to which their solution is not the correct one. But let's also bring in a political element here, because I think there does need to be the analysis that actually what we're seeing here, sir, is not just something which is being done for the right motivation of the environment, but is actually politically expedient, sir. So I think what's happened, there's a strong argument to say that this is the case. Certainly one interpretation is that we've had a Chief Minister who is effectively uncontested, and I think he's given too many sweets out. He's been handing the sweets out before the ministerials were appointed. And then when it's come to it, he's realised that actually he doesn't have enough sweets, sir. Because Mr. Troy's sweet shop only allows you to have a certain number of sweets that you can give out. And so he's already scrambling around saying, look, we need to get a bigger sweet shop so that I can give more sweets out. We've already seen the consequence of the fact the government doesn't need any more sweets. They've got this assembly pretty much in their pocket, sir, although I hope that will be increasingly not the case as we get some fine debate. I know that we've got some very capable debaters in here because I've heard some of them during the hustings, and I hope we hear from them during this first proper debate that we're having now. And so the Chief Minister, I think, is going down an avenue of what I think is taking Jersey back to pre-2008, or what Jersey was like in the 1980s and 90s. There might be more women in the Assembly, but we're seeing a job creation scheme, and it's very much business as usual, jobs for the boys, sir. He hasn't got enough jobs, so he's creating more jobs, and he's giving them to the members of the Old Boys Network, sir. We just need to look at the back row of the Council of Ministers. All of the top jobs have gone to the men, even though we've had 4 very good senatorial candidates elected. And it's worth saying at this point that there seems to be this new doctrine that's come in. If you're a senator, you automatically get a ministerial role. Of course, those ministerial roles won't always be equal. I'm not sure how that's crept in, because my understanding of it is, the way I look at it is, I think we've got some senators who would have struggled to get in as deputies in the island. And my analysis is also that that's part of the reason that the senatorial roles were brought back, because some of these ministers had no constituencies to go to or to go back to. But that, sir, is just my analysis, sir, and I don't want to get into any territory that might be called ad hominem. But that's just one analysis, and I think the politics of it does need to be analysed as an alternative motive for what we're seeing here. So we see the Chief Minister, a man. We see the Treasury Minister, a man. We see the Finance and External Relations Minister job given to a man. We see the Economic Development Minister job being given to a man, not even a senator in this case. How could they give it to a lowly deputy? I'm sure he's very qualified. And of course, the Deputy Chief Minister is a man. The Health Minister is a man. The poll topper, of course, isn't a man, it's a woman, and she's been given her old job back as Home Affairs. And we see other jobs being created, an assistant minister role for a newcomer. We also see that my member that I really like, of course, who I'm glad got in as well, even if she did knock out one of our party members, has been given a job that she clearly wants at environment. And here's the rub. She's having most of that role removed from her today. That's what we're passing. So the Chief Minister says, you can have that role, Senator Lehegarat, but I'm going to take all of the good stuff, the interesting stuff, away from you to start. So am I making this a feminist issue? I don't know. I'm just stating some facts. If other members in this Assembly want to interpret that in that way. Now, the Minister, of course, has tried to spin this, the Chief Minister has tried to spin this by saying that, of course, it's going to give more power to the environment. So somehow by removing environmental powers and protections, you're protecting the environment. So great, I mean, it's not just going back to the early 2000s, it's going back to 1984, because we're hearing a great example of doublespeak here. So when the Minister says there'll be stronger environmental leadership, creating a dedicated Minister for Environment enables greater political focus upon biodiversity recovery, agriculture, fisheries, water, air quality, PFAS, coastal protection, and natural environment policy and countryside management. I mean, well, the Minister already had that before the changes were made. And the point that I would make, sir, here, is that the power is only effective to lead on those policies because of the regulatory powers that underpin them. So we risk adopting policies here which don't get implemented. And this is, I think, a very real risk. And I think there is an experience that shows that policies will only get implemented if the rules require it through regulation. So one question that I may ask to the Attorney General is that actually what powers is the Environment Minister being left with here? Also, I'm not going to ask this question necessarily, I'll leave those as rhetorical for the moment, but other members may wish to consider these. Also the fact that we're not just talking about environmental powers which are now being handed over to the Planning Minister, we're looking at things to do with the regulation of care. I mean, why on earth would the regulation of care be being moved over to the Planning Minister? The Planning Minister, it's quite bizarre. I think it's natural that, and the environmental health being moved over to the Planning Minister, it's already been said by the scrutiny panel. Now, what we should be doing in this Assembly is not simply rubber stamping anything that this Council of Ministers wants. What we should be saying is, look, make a case for this. If you think it is the right thing to do, let's have a proper consultative period where we can look at these issues. And let's talk to the wider community. Let's talk to those many champions in the community, not just those who we supposedly heard from at election time saying, there's far too much regulation, we need to get rid of it. I'm accepting that there might be some things that need to be done in terms of streamlining in our planning process that make it more sensible. And, arguably, this is perhaps questions that will come to the Minister when he puts himself forward about the balance between private rights for those who want to develop versus those that have much more of an environmental and public impact. Of course, those balances are always there to be struck, sir. But I think we need that wider discourse with the community that hasn't happened, sir. And I think it would actually be a great example of leadership if the Chief Minister were to say, actually, rather than encouraging his council to reject this proposition, saying, OK, I will take that pause. I will use the summer recess as an opportunity to give a fuller report to present back to this Assembly, which I'm sure the chair of the scrutiny panel would welcome once she's got a fully constituted scrutiny panel. that they can look at that report, that they can do it in real time. And as we know in the past, scrutiny has worked very quickly to be able to provide their comments and say, actually, you can go ahead with this, but we need to be making sure as an assembly that we've taken into these areas of consideration. Because of course, what it all boils down to, and what I remember former Senator Ferguson saying, was that it's the law of unintended consequences. It's fine to say that there's no additional cost here, but we don't know about what those additional costs are until actually we realise that there may be future implications. So at the moment we're being told, and the Attorney General said this is a political issue, that actually there's a political decision to be made about who does what. But I can imagine a scenario where we have a very strong and vocal champion for the environment, and I'll give you one example. It may well be, and I'm not putting words into anyone's mouth, but this is hypothetical, that we have a big question mark that's arising over what to do with all these dilapidated greenhouses in the countryside, and that an environment minister may say, look, you know, we need to either get rid of these greenhouses and put them back to nature, or we need to actually enforce the dilapidated buildings regulations which require those farmers to put them back into the state that they should have been, into active glasshouses. And that environment minister's viewpoint might be that they should be turned into community allotments or whatever. She might be very strong at saying that. The planning minister will now have all the laws and be saying, that's very good, Senator Lehegerat, but actually I think we just need to cut red tape. That's what I was elected on. And before you know it, there's going to be lots of building in those areas. Now that's fine. Those are political decisions that need to be made. But I think actually suggesting that this is going to actually enhance environmental protections is nothing less than, I think, offensive to those who care about the environment. And I think we would do very well to support what Deputy Coles is proposing here fully, and to actually let the Council of Ministers come back, show their working so that we can have some proper consensus around this very far-reaching issue.
Thank you, Deputy. Constable St John.
Thank you, sir. So I feel it's a case of déjà vu. A new assembly, but where do we start? We start by talking about ourselves once more. Sadly, I have to disagree with the previous speaker, my fellow St John parishioner, as I don't believe this has got anything to do with gender. So the public who participated in the recent election have, I believe, an expectation that we will all roll our sleeves up and get on with things. I suspect many who didn't participate in the recent election didn't take part as they think we don't get on and do things, so why bother? Sir, I see what the Chief Minister is proposing as a good example of simply getting on with things. Sir, I fully respect the Chair of the Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel, and I have to disagree with her and would ask her to look at this proposal with a different lens. Speaking from personal experience, the Chair is more than capable of holding a Minister to account, whether that's on water, waste, pollution, etc., whoever the responsible minister is. The Chief Minister referred to a proposal from 2009 when a split in the functions was first proposed, and there are many reasons to put more focus on both environment and planning. Many members and probably thousands of islanders could give us a whole range of issues with both of these areas, and this is not a reflection on the previous minister or ministers. Rather, it is a reflection on the process. We are not being asked to change the island plan this morning. The way I see it, we are being asked to put more focus on both planning and environment, and I, for one, welcome this. Any work that is done to review regulation should, in my view, be a way of delivering efficiencies rather than actually costing us and islanders more money. I'm very hopeful that the proposed changes will put more emphasis on both reviewing the planning process as well as putting more emphasis on enforcement. Both areas have significant room for improvement, in my opinion, and so I'm happy to support the Chief Minister's proposal to split the role and will vote against the proposition today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conatard. Does anyone else wish to speak on this proposition? Senator Lehegerat.
Thank you, sir. I find it very interesting this morning because with one hand we say we fully accept what the Chief Minister has done is right, and then on the other hand say we don't like it. So for me, that is already a contradictory fact. In relation to what the changes were made, myself, when I got the list, I looked at the proposed changes and I straight away said, as the Environment Minister, I would like these pieces of legislation. I had consultation also with my colleague who is going to work in the department with me, and we agreed the things that we wanted, and we have what we want. The interesting part in relation to Deputy Tadier's comments about all the good jobs going to the male colleagues, I do not agree. And those of you, and particularly I think Deputy Tadier, and he probably, sir, actually knew by saying what he said, he'd get me off my seat. Because it is quite characteristic. I only speak when there's a need to. And at this stage, there's a need to. Now, I think that this is an exceptionally good idea. I have a history, as you all know, and I'm not an expert on the environment, as maybe one of my colleagues has a lot more brain power than I do. However, I am passionate. I'm fully supportive of agriculture and fisheries. So for me, I have, sir, the dream job. Now, I'm sitting next to my colleague. Trust me, if you sat around the Council of Ministers table with me in the last 2.5 years, you know that I'm as feisty as anybody and I will fight my corner. So that is the first point. In relation to the department and the split of it, do we all, or have we all forgotten about the target operating model? We got rid of all of the chief executives in the different departments and we threw it under one person, and that's what we still have. However, what we do have in those departments is the staff that do those jobs. Those staff will still be doing those jobs because they will sit in, maybe not in the same part of the department, but they will still be doing the same jobs. So they all work together. So waste, water, all of those teams already work together. They already discuss all of these issues. Yes, there will be different ministers in charge of waste and water. However, what that means is that as a Council of Ministers, we will have to come back and have a discussion about all of these things. And in actual fact, will that not be better for us as a Council of Ministers to be working more closely together than we were before? Because there is always room for improvement. In relation to what people are talking about, the reason that I have the legislation that I have is because, as I said, it is what sits with the environment, agriculture and fisheries. That is why I and my colleague, Deputy Morell, have said, and the department have agreed, the officers we've spoken to as well, we've said we want this law. I specifically answered the question that Deputy Curtis asked me about land law. I'm passionate about land law. So for me, I want it. It's as simple as that. So for me, I don't see this male-female designation. I'm not interested, if I'm honest. For me, I have a job that I want. And I, for the next 4 years, will do my utmost to ensure that all of those areas are protected. In relation to some of the regulations that were under this remit before, they've gone to planning and regulation, sir. Guess why? Because that's where they're gone. We seem to be totally focusing on planning. But all of the other regulations, which we as an organiser, as an assembly, have created over years, are strangling us. As rightly as people have said, in the last few years, we have created a whole load of different things. We've created a whole load of regulations, and we can't do business. We can't do anything because we've over-regulated ourselves to the size of a country. And we're not. We're a small island. Trust me, we will not be building big houses on the 5 Mile Road on a golf course. I won't say it so because it would be inappropriate for what I was going to say. Now, the other thing I would like to point out is I don't always like to look to those north. I prefer the ones to that side, but I don't like always looking to the things north. If you look north, the UK, do they have planning and environment together? No, they don't. They have them totally separate. Northern Ireland have them separate. Northern Ireland has rural economy, environment, agriculture and fisheries. And me would like to see us actually start to progress and support these industries a lot more by actually having them together in that environment. And the other point about should environment and agriculture and fisheries not gone, or environment gone to the Sustainable Economic Development Minister, absolutely not. On one hand, we're saying, oh no, we can't put planning and environment separately. And on the other hand, we're then saying, well, if you're going to split them, why can't they go over there? That does not make sense to me. They sit where they should sit. And for those of us, sir, that are old enough, will know what the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries looked like at Howard Davis Farm all those years ago. What we had was agriculture and fisheries and all of those types of things in one location. And what we did was we threw everything to do with business of any description into a bucket and said over here. And that's what we've done when we put all of those roles within the role of the economic development. And in actual fact, one has to say, you can't manage all of those different things, and actually, to me, by actually changing the remit and withdrawing agriculture and fisheries, splitting this role is a perfect option, and I'm fully supportive of the changes, and I will not be voting for this proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Does anyone else wish to speak on this proposition? If no one else wishes to speak, I call upon Deputy Coles to reply. Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. And I'm glad to follow Senator Lehegger up, because actually there's so much stuff there that she mentioned that was really, really good and really, really important. This idea that you take a look at everybody's portfolio, re-establish where everything sits better, and bringing them together, because that's absolutely the right thing we need to do. But you need to think about it. You need to address everything. But actually, when you do something so quickly, are we doing it right? Have we missed something? Have we considered something not completely in the round? The Senator also mentions about big country and how we've regulated ourselves to the same ways we do a big country. She then goes on to point out about England and Ireland and how they split planning and environment, which are big countries. Obviously, Jersey's small. So maybe keeping the two things together is actually more cost effective and efficient, because you're comparing apples and oranges sometimes. I also think sometimes, and I'm just going back over the regulation part, because there is a big question over regulation and why it is needed and why it's important. And maybe this is more of a thought of a warning, that if we do things too quickly and we cut our regulation too much, we will find ourselves in a position where we can't deal with big countries anymore. As many will know, that the UK-EU reset negotiations are going to start soon, and this will have a really big impact on our economy with regards to like our fishers being able to land fish in Granville and other ports along Normandy, as well as access through from the common travel area into the EU. There are so many things on the line, and of course this, and I mention this, sir, because it fits within the Minister for Environment's portfolio. Or does it? Because I'm not necessarily sure at what point where that law currently sits, whether there's going to be another review and whether that sits under regulation, whether that sits under environment, because that's going to be a big negotiation that's going to require resources to ensure that islanders who have needs to export things to the EU is able to do so, and as some members of this Assembly pushed for the cheap German supermarket, maybe it will be cheaper to import their goods from the EU, which you can't do quite so easily as you can from the UK. So I just looked through some of the notes that I've written down, and of course, sweet shops came up. I'm sure most of us were wishing we all had a gobstopper right now, or at least I had one, so I won't go on for too much longer. But there is the talks around the improving of the planning service. And I feel they're saying that a little bit disrespectful to the former minister, the former Deputy Steve Luce, who, when he took over for the last 2 years, we saw an accelerated line of approvals come through our planning service, because he brought improvements. whilst also bringing forward the food law, the animal welfare law. The former deputy did a lot of good work in a short period of time as one person looking after that department, sir. So one of my, and I believe it is hard when Deputy Curtis and Deputy Jones made some really good points because I don't necessarily want to repeat on them. But there is some that confused me in the schedule that the Minister made the point in the comments paper. Things like the food law and the high hedges law. High hedges, obviously, they do more than just block out light from one person to another, and I know they're about height, but they also hold our biodiversity. So if those two things are separate, are we at risk of cutting down a hedge which actually holds a rare bird species, a rare bat species, or just does something that improves our biodiversity, which improves our agriculture, which keeps our lives going? And the food laws, sitting within planning and regulation, the team that look after that is called Environmental Health, sir. So there is the confusion. Are they going to then be enforced by Environmental Health, which sits under the Minister for Planning and Regulation? Or would that be still something that sits under the remit of the Minister for Environment? Because the big question that keeps outstanding is around enforcement. It is good to have people who look at individual laws and come up with individual policies and can actually dedicate their time to that without being drawn too thin, sir. But it's got to be done properly. As mentioned, with the State of Jersey law and this being done by order, like I've said, nothing disrespectful to the Chief Minister. My proposition is worded in such a way because it is his right to make these orders. The way to challenge that order, sir, is with an annulment. And of course, that feels a little bit more heavy-handed. That is really asking to put the full brakes on and hit it hard. Where, sir, I've just asked a series of questions, but while the Assistant Minister, where Senator Bollier is an Assistant Minister with delegated functions, I'm not preventing any work from carrying on. In the comments paper, sir, it talks about the consideration of mergers of different portfolios. Of course, yes, in my report there is mention about sustainable economic development and the environment when you consider what's left. But there is also a consideration that actually where you've moved something, somebody has a bit more space, maybe something else could be moved somewhere else. There is room for full assessment of all ministerial portfolios because that also sits within the Chief Minister's gift. He could redesign all his portfolios so they actually work the best. But you need to take time to do that. So I appreciate he has to present his slate of ministers, whether the Assembly adopts those, and then that can change. So, sir, I think actually having a review of this particular division of legislation could actually open the door to see more potential, more ways for the Chief Minister to deliver on his common strategic policy that we'll see after the summer. Because that's what governments are here to do, is to deliver and to deliver efficiently and effectively. But if we rush things, we get things wrong, and then we have conflict internally, and that becomes a problem. So this doesn't stop any work, as I've said. So I would be grateful if members could support this. Let's have a look at legislation. Let the Chief Minister and his teams look at this properly, provide the rest of the Assembly the transparency of what is going to be done, and of course, actually, the last thing I should mention, so before I sit down, when we talk about cost, we don't also, when people think cost, they automatically go to financials, but not every cost is financial. If we move a research and project officer from one project to another, the cost is that first project loses a resource because it moves to do something else. So that is a cost in time, that is a cost in delivery, but it is not a financial cost. And that is one of the things when I say about cost and staff and resources that comes out of that. What is going to be delayed? What is going to be cancelled? What is not going to be delivered so that somebody else can deliver something else? What are the priorities? That is what is not clear from this report, sir. And so that's what I asked the Chief Minister to deliver. And so, sir, I call for the appel.
Thank you, Deputy. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce the proposition has been rejected. 15 votes pour, 31 votes contre. Yes.
Those voting for the Colotabs of St Martin, St Clement, St Warren, Grouville and St Saviour, and Deputies Tadier, Doublé, Alves, Coles, Alex Curtis, Feltham, Jearn, Porre, Wilson and Carpenter.
Yes, I will now move on to the appointments. Chief Minister.
So in line with Article 29A, following the result of that vote, sir, I have now signed the order enabling the next item on the agenda to proceed, namely the election of the Minister for Planning and Environment.
Yes. All right. So we now move on to the selection of the Minister for Planning and Regulation. So in accordance with Standing Order 117.2E, I ask the Chief Minister to make his nomination for the position of Minister for Planning and Regulation. I remind members that neither nomination nor seconding may be the pretext for any substantive speech. Chief Minister, do you have a nomination for this appointment?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. I would like to nominate Senator Mark Bolyat for the position of Minister for Planning and Regulation. Thank you.
Is the nomination seconded?
Yes, sir.
Are there any other nominations? Deputy Carpenter.
Yes, sir. I would like to nominate Deputy Tadier.
Is that nomination seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Thank you. In that case, we'll then have a period of speeches for up to 10 minutes and then questions for up to 20 minutes. And I invite Deputy Tadier to leave the chamber for the speech and questions involving Senator Bolyat. Thank you, Deputy. Senator Bolyat, you have 10 minutes to address the Assembly, followed by questions for up to 20 minutes. Senator.
Sir, I enjoyed the last debate, I think. It felt at times like being a patient on the operating table with eminent physicians discussing what, if anything, to do with me. But I'm pleased we've got that over. I thank the Chief Minister for nominating me to this new position as Minister for Planning and Regulation. I'm aware that there have been and will continue to be discussions about the appropriate delineation of functions, and it's quite right that time should be taken to decide exactly where responsibilities lie. But I've no doubt that the principle of seeking to bring together several regulatory functions under one minister and in one department so as to help ensure consistency and economies of scale is the right one. Each member will have their own views on what they want to achieve in their term of office. For some, that will be new laws or propositions, and I respect that. In my case, it may mean fewer laws and fewer propositions. I strongly believe that Jersey must have planning and regulatory systems appropriate for Jersey, not imported wholesale from the UK or anywhere else. But we can learn from others, and that's where I think I can help ensure that Jersey benefits from doing so. I was a member of the City of London's Planning Committee for around 10 years and Deputy Chairman of its Streets and Walkways Subcommittee, in which capacity I was delighted to host visits from the then Connétable of St Helier and the Environment Minister to share experiences and ideas. I also had experience of planning as a director of a major house builder, a member of Mayor Sadiq Khan's Homes for Londoners Board, and chair of the Housing and Finance Institute, for which I wrote a paper entitled "The Housing Problem in London, a Broken Planning System." Locally, I've been chair of both Andium Homes and the Jersey Development Company. Similarly, on regulation, in Jersey, I have chaired the Competition Authority, and in the UK, I set up the system for regulating claims management companies. I was also a member of the Regulatory Policy Committee, which was charged with validating impact assessments that accompanied proposed new laws and regulations. Is that relevant to Jersey? I think having an impact assessment, not on states' manpower and employment and expenditure, but on people and businesses, would be a really good development, and I hope we can make progress on that. So how would I see my role in planning? I must do what the law requires, which includes considering reports by inspectors who've heard appeals and ensuring that the Bridging Island Plan and relevant laws and policies are complied with. But there's a wider role to support the private sector and the public interest to ensure that the planning system is fit for purpose and does not become a barrier to economic growth. I was open in my election campaign that I regarded the current system as an obstacle to economic growth. That does not mean ripping up the system and removing protection, but it does mean having policies that are proportionate and appropriate, and which have due regard to the impact that they will have. This is particularly true in respect of residential properties. Sadly, planning and housing is an area where data to inform policy are inadequate, something I will seek to remedy. But we know that about 3/4 of homes sold every year are existing homes. A developer cannot simply build whatever they like in the knowledge that somebody will have to buy it. Developers have gone bust because they produced homes that people do not want to buy. We should therefore be wary about loading requirements onto developers of new homes which people are not willing to pay for. The effect may not be that we have better homes. It may be that we have fewer homes. I'm pleased to say that work is in train to simplify the planning system, building on the work that Deputy Luce did in the last Assembly. In particular, the voluminous documentation that must be provided with planning applications will be reduced. The Bridging Island Plan has an end date of 2025, but the law is such that the plan remains in operation until there is another plan. So I'll be taking forward work to develop a new plan, in which, of course, all members of the Assembly will be fully involved. In the meantime, the Assembly has agreed to allow amendments to be made to the existing plan, which I will be working on alongside the scrutiny panel during the process, rather than simply expecting the panel to comment on proposals. And the Assembly will, of course, have the final word. Turning to the wider regulation brief, I should start by quoting the Chief Minister, who told this Assembly, "We are regulating like a big country, and we are not a big country." And I should add the thoughtful comments from the island's Chief Executive in his speech to the Chamber of Commerce. He pointed out that while each regulatory measure could be justified at the time it was introduced, it was the totality of measures, frequently overlapping, if not conflicting, that causes problems. The 2023 Barriers to Business report noted that Jersey currently has 1,368 active laws dating back to 1771. 60% of respondents in its survey stated that regulation has had a negative impact on their business. Starting a business in Jersey is a complex process, I know, I've done 2 of them, made even more intimidating by the lengthy 12-step process outlined on the government's website. This involves registering with different parts of government, and that doesn't include the parishes, the Office of the Information Commissioner, or the Financial Services Commission. A recent social media post summed up the position quite well. Having recently set up a business, I cannot stress how unnecessarily difficult the process is made by bureaucracy, disorganisation, and the endless hoops to jump through. It went on, there's the sheer number of registrations and forms, each department firing out its own IDs and reference numbers. Parish, JOIC, Manpower, TIN, Social, JFSC, etc. OneGov, if I'm allowed to mention that, yet none of them seem to speak to each other. It concluded with request for a small win. If you're a government department and you have a PDF that needs filling out, please make sure that the fields are editable. This is basic. It should be the norm. I made my views known on regulation during the campaign. Of course, regulation must be proportionate. No one disagrees with that. They just disagree on what proportionate is. But take the requirements that a business has to go through when it wants to employ somebody off island. That business has done a business case. That's what a business does. And it's worked out that that is what it needs to do. Yet it then has to produce another business case to a government department, which will be considered by people who are not in business. And that's before they attempt to complete the associated forms, which come with a warning that the person filling it in should set aside an hour and a half to complete it because it cannot be saved. Of course, these are individual examples of how we can bring positive change, but they're also part of a whole where everything I will seek to do will be focused on improving things for the people of Jersey, whether helping them run their businesses, improve their homes, or have better jobs. And in everything I do, I will, as I said during my election campaign, work collaboratively with all members of the Assembly, and as important, with businesses, charities, and interest groups that have got something constructive to contribute to the policy-making process. I ask for the support of members for this position. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Now I'll move to a period of questions of up to 20 minutes. First question from Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I'll be doing this question to both candidates. On reading P62, the comment paper, which sets out the responsibilities of the two separated roles. However, there's an item of responsibility that fell under the previous Minister for the Environment duties, which does not seem to be itemised or identified in either of the two roles. This being the Jersey Care Commission, which was under the old system of responsibilities, plus the care law. Will the candidate for Minister of Planning and Regulation explain where does this health-related commission sit? And is it appropriate for care and health-regulated laws fall under this proposed planning and regulation remit? And if not, where?
Senator.
Sir, I'm grateful for the question. I think the law fits within the regulatory department, and indeed earlier this morning I had a preliminary meeting with the Chair and Chief Executive of the Care Commission. I thought it was a very productive meeting. That function currently belongs in the environment, the wider environment department. I can see little logic in it belonging to a department concerned with the environment. So that is something that I believe has been transferred, the appropriate law. I haven't had, if you'd asked a longer question, I could have looked it up, but I'm afraid the question was not long enough to do so, but I believe that rests with the new department. Sir.
Supplementary? Supplementary, Deputy Ward?
Not at this time, but thank you for your response.
Deputy Jones.
Thank you. Does the Senator support the polluter pays principle as one that should underpin the licensing fees and enforcement approach of his department? So the polluter pays principle.
Senator.
Sir, the polluter pays should be the starting point for any discussion. The issue is the polluter doesn't like paying, and the polluter can have substantial political power. So ultimately it's a matter for this Assembly. But certainly as a principle, that would be the starting point. What the end point will be will depend on political discussions. Sir.
Supplementary?
Yes, sir, thank you. And I thank the Senator for his answers, and I suppose that's his answer preempted My follow-up question, which is how would the senator weigh the proportionality against the principle that environmental costs should sit with the polluter pay rather than the taxpayer or the ratepayers? So how would the senator weigh that proportionality for that principle when he says that it's about political, but for himself? How would he weigh that?
Senator.
So I tried to preempt the question, but clearly failed to do so in its entirety. I think that is very difficult. In terms of developing policy, I'm a firm believer that you take all interests into account, but most importantly, you do not listen most to the person who shouts loudest, or the person who's got the most lobbying power. And that's something I think all political organisations fall into that trap, that because somebody has sent 35 emails, that view is worthy of somebody who sent none, but has an equally valid view. Or because there's a media campaign, we should respond to it. So I think that requires politicians to look at the facts, to look at who will be impacted, and to take the right decision that in many cases is going to be an unpopular decision. And if you do not want to take unpopular decisions, do not become a government minister.
Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. Will the candidate support the continued work of the Planning Committee, made up of elected states members, as part of a planning system that considers and determines matters under relevant planning law?
Senator.
So I'm an enthusiastic supporter of the Planning Committee. As I mentioned earlier, I did serve for 10 years on a planning committee in the City of London. It was a committee of 35 members. And I would say to this Assembly, a committee of 35 members is not a great committee. But I did learn a fair bit about planning, and I saw the value of planning committees. I think what is particularly important, very relevant to the work of this committee, we all know that the Bridging Island plan is not fit for purpose, and it will remain not fit for purpose until we replace it. The planning committee is the committee that has the power to decide something that is against the island plan, because it is in the wider interest that it does so. And that, I think, is a vital role for the committee to play, to look at something which is not in accordance with the plan, but is clearly desirable. And I commend what the committee did on the Strive proposal, for example, a good case of where the committee is looking at a proposition in the round for the benefit of the whole island, not simply slavishly saying, because the plan says no, we can't do it. So.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Yes, a recent letter to the editor of the JEP highlighted the committee and perhaps suggested it isn't a valid role, and I would suggest painted it in a more negative light. Does the candidate consider that the committee can play a very positive role and actually should be presented in a positive role, in particular the fact that it provides a zero-cost review process for applicants who've had refused applications, and that actually it's important to champion the positive work that the committee can do as an enabler?
Senator.
Sir, yes, sir.
Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. I rise after Barbara Ward's, Deputy Ward's question. Regulation of Care Law 2014 does sit within the proposed minister's remit. Does he agree that the separation from regulator and service provider is an essential part of regulation?
Senator.
So I'm grateful to the Deputy for clarifying my responsibilities. I've been involved in regulation for far more years than I care to consider, and I've been looking at Jersey for many years. Where you draw the line can be very arbitrary. And the one thing I've learned in working in politics over many years is that structures matter a lot less than people. The right people can make a poor structure work. The wrong people will make a bad structure not work. Now, already since the Council of Ministers was established, I have worked with my colleague, Senator Lahagarat, perfectly well. We've sat together considering matters. I've had discussions with other ministers on specific matters. The Ministerial Code of Conduct requires that where something cuts across more than one department, ministers work together, and that is exactly what I will be doing. Now, some of the things I might want to do on regulation do not fall within my responsibility. They may fall within the responsibility of the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development, and he will be receiving a few emails from me suggesting where we might discuss such matters. So it's about people working together, and that is absolutely what I'm committed to doing, regardless of what the structure says. Sir.
Supplementary.
Yes, sir, because the question was originally about enforcement, because sometimes we have to get to that point where somebody breaks the rules and they have to be held to account for that, sir. So with the right glass walls and the right glass partitions, does the Minister then agree or not whether or not the enforcement should be separated from the rulemaker?
Senator.
So there are any number of examples where rulemaking and enforcement sit in the same organisation. I would think the Jersey Financial Services Commission would be one, where it makes up the rules and it enforces them. Where that happens, then there needs to be some form of appeal procedure. However you look at it, there are pros and cons of having rulemaking and enforcement in the same organisation or having them in different organisations. Either can be made to work with the right people. So there are some enforcement responsibilities, quite a few that come with the responsibility for being the Minister for Planning and Regulation, and indeed there's a question about one of them for later today. So I don't see a problem with them being in the same organisation, nor do I see a problem with them being in different organisations. Either can work. So.
Deputy Alves.
Thank you, sir. Will the candidate give his view on maintaining public access to our coastlines? Thank you, sir.
Senator.
Sir, as an avid walker, before my knees decided it wasn't a good idea, absolutely. I think our coastline is one of Jersey's great advantages. It's something we must protect. It's not always possible to do it, but as a starting point, I would absolutely support that. And again, learning from the City of London, and I don't wish to keep emphasising that, it doesn't go down well with some people. We spent 20 or 30 years building the path alongside the Thames. And it took that length of time. You had to do it with individual development. So I think preserving access to the coastline is absolutely essential. So.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. How does the Senator think he will go about protecting it if there is a conflict or there is some dispute on that? How will he manage that? Thank you.
Senator.
So that depends a bit on the nature of the dispute. If it is a planning application that threatens the coastline, that will be a matter for the planning committee, which will take the appropriate decision. I think you can never say never. There may be circumstances in which the coastline can't be adequately protected, but my starting point is that absolutely it should be protected. If something comes to me for a decision, and the planning minister has to take decisions in a sort of judicial capacity, not quite as important as your judicial capacity, sir, but you have to look at all of the evidence and take the appropriate decision, and that is what I would seek to do, sir.
Robertson Clement.
Thank you, sir. Speak about structures that don't work. What do you see the future for our derelict and dangerous greenhouses?
Senator.
So that's a subject on which I have an interest because I live within a mile of 3 of them. One of them I'm happy to say in the parish of Grouville. But the other 2 are in St Clements. I have to say that derelict greenhouse sites, in my view, do not enhance our natural environment. It's a difficult issue. The Bridging Island plan is clear that they must be returned to agricultural use. But the fact is, some of them are not going to be returned to agricultural use. There is supplementary planning guidance that covers this at present. I think there's a case for reviewing that guidance. I'm not saying changing it, but for reviewing it, and that's something I would wish to do in conjunction with the panel to see whether it is appropriate, because I do not think it is appropriate that these sites, which have been derelict for 20 years, I think I'm right in saying, that should not continue. So.
Supplementary. Deputy Lee.
Thank you, sir. The Senator will recall that during his leadership in the city, the Square Miles adopted the 20 miles per hour speed limit and prioritized the pedestrian safety in the dense urban environment, not unlike St Helier. Will he bring the same approach to Jersey by making safe school routes and safe school access a material planning consideration in the new island plan?
So I think safety, particularly for children going to school, is vitally important. It is difficult. It is difficult in a small island where you have roads. I frequently walk all the way from Pontac to one of the excellent cafes at Gorey. That is one of the island's main roads, and on part of that road, particularly in the parish of Grouville, there are no pavements at all. What I do observe is that drivers, on the whole, being very careful, or perhaps they're just worried about me when they see me walking. In terms of doing it for schools, I'm very old, as some members of the Assembly will know. The prospect of being driven to school didn't apply when I was young because people didn't have cars. And amazingly, children got to school and got back, and they were not abducted on the way there or back. Now it seems that children have to be delivered door to door. I would sincerely hope that we can move away from that. And it having safe routes, and I know some work's been done with some schools, is absolutely vital. But it is hard work because the starting point is our road system, which was largely designed by General Conway with a view to fighting the French. He could have designed them for other purposes, but that's what happened, and those roads are not ideal for other purposes. We have to make the best we can with the road system we have, sir.
Supplementary?
Thank you, sir. Can he assure our parents in St. Helens North that children and young people walking to school in Jersey will receive the same consideration he gave to the commuters in the city?
Senator.
Sir, we didn't actually have any children in the city, which made it easier. The number was tiny and we had one primary school. But we did many things in the city, including making streets pedestrian only. We introduced the wrong-way cycling up streets, which was incredibly controversial. I did point out that we were only introducing it in streets where it happened anyway, and we were merely legalising it. Nobody died as a result. But the city solved that problem because the traffic moves so slowly, pedestrians go faster than the cars anyway. I don't think we should be trying to do that in Jersey, although we seem to be doing our best at times. Sir.
I'm going to call upon members not ask a question before coming to ones who've already asked a question who want to ask a second question. Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. What will the candidate do to protect mature trees which cannot be simply replaced with new planting?
Senator.
So I think the law does that. The law is very clear about trees. Unfortunately, we can't protect against Storm Ciarán, which I think did more damage to our trees than any developers could have done. So I think we have a planning system that properly protects trees. But again, that's always a question of balance. There will be time when there are other considerations that mean that a mature tree may have to be removed. But the planning system is there to consider those matters, and I'm sure that the planning committee will absolutely, in looking at those issues, wish to protect not only mature trees, but all trees where it is possible to do so. And it's only in exceptional cases where that would not happen. So.
Supplementary.
Sir, given I think there is a political consensus that actually our legislation does not adequately protect trees, would the candidate, if elected, agree to look at this to see where the legislation could be strengthened in this area?
Senator.
Sir, I think we have supplementary planning guidance on that. Absolutely, I will look at that. So.
Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. I wonder if the candidate, if the Minister could mention earlier that he mentioned earlier that the current Bridging Island plan is not fit for purpose. Can you give some indication as to what his plans are to make it fit for purpose?
Sir, I cannot tell a lie. I haven't read the entire plan. But I read enough of the beginning of it to know that the assumptions on which it were based turned out to be not correct at all. And if the assumptions are not correct, the plan is unlikely to be correct. My observation reading the plan is that it was predominantly a plan about protecting the past, not about preparing the island for the future. There are very few references to economy and a lot about preserving what we've got. Now, I'm all in favour of preservation. I live in an 18th century farmhouse that's been not just preserved, but beautifully modernised as well. So we do have to preserve everything that is great about Jersey, but that doesn't mean preserving everything. And we do have policies in some areas where the wish to preserve prevents things happening. And I'll give an example of St Saviour's Hospital. The development brief for that says it is a heritage project. But nobody is willing to pay for a heritage project. Therefore, we have a derelict building instead. So we do have to balance the heritage requirements against other requirements. And I think, walking around the island when I can, I observe some farm buildings that can best be described as near derelict. That they could be turned into really nice housing. But you can't do that if there's a wish to preserve everything that was there. Now, equally, there are many old farms that have been beautifully modernised into excellent housing that look really attractive from the outside. But if you attempt to require too many or too much preservation of what's there, the risk is someone's going to say, I can't afford doing it. And I've had chapter and verse on a few people of what they've tried to do, and they've given up because the cost was simply not worth it. And if the planners would rather I have a derelict building than a modern building, that's what's going to happen. And I do not want to see that continue. Sir.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Does the Minister then, is he suggesting that there will be a change in the philosophy that he will engage with to develop a system that is sometimes process-led to one that is more focused on enabling sustainable growth? And could he also then explain, if that is the case, how he will aim to broker or address the tensions between local planning in parishes and more strategic planning decisions?
Senator.
Sir, I thank the Deputy. I think that's a really good question. I've already made it clear to officers that the job of the planning system is to assist businesses that want to develop their business and to help people who want to improve their homes. And in doing so, of course, it has to protect things that need protecting. But the emphasis should be on helping and assisting. And this applies to regulators across the board. I have had experience of regulation. And I can tell you the biggest changes I've seen in regulation is when the regulator changes, i.e. the person changes. And I'll give a direct example. When I became chair of the Competition Authority, we had two senior officers who loved looking at international mergers.
Your time is up.
My time is up, sir.
I need to be quite strict when there's two candidates. So
sir, I will do as I'm told.
Your time is up. Thank you. So can I invite you now to withdraw from the chamber and ask someone to locate Deputy Tadia. Deputy, when you're ready, you can start your speech.
Thank you, sir. Je vais peut-être commencer en français, monsieur, parce qu'aujourd'hui c'est le 14 juillet.
Oui.
Alors c'est le jour de la Bastille, la fête de la Révolution en France. Alors d'abord, je veux saluer tout le monde et vous souhaiter tous une bonne fête nationale française. And before people continue with their panicked looks on the faces from new members, it is of course a long-standing tradition that any member of this assembly can address our assembly in French, and I do so for two reasons. The first is because today is the 14th of July, it is La Bastille, Bastille Day, so I wish everybody in the assembly and anyone listening a bonne fête, sir, including yourself. The second is that I decided whilst I was out of the room to ask the internet what was great about the French planning system. We've probably heard something about the UK planning system, I suspect, from the previous member who's got a lot of experience of it. We know obviously about our own planning system, but what might be good about the French planning system? And the answer I was given is that it has an integrated spatial strategy, that French communes are highly encouraged to develop unified local plans that coordinate economic development, ecology and public transport, and that it provides a holistic approach that doesn't ensure growth happens in a vacuum. They're also very big on architectural preservation. Now, this shouldn't come as a surprise because we've been to some of the great French cities, and in fact, not just the cities, but the smaller villages. We notice how the French take care about their system to make sure that there are different quartiers, different quarters in the town, and that their buildings are very well preserved and they value their culture. So the French system is excellent at safeguarding cultural heritage through specialised zoning. Regional authorities preserve the distinct vernacular of architecture, sir. So I'm not sure if that's quite the case in Jersey. When I walk through town, and if I'm ever with a group of tourists, I say there is some great architecture in St Helier in particular, but you have to look up, because when you look at the lower levels of our shops, they're not very consistent. There seems to be a mismatch. And there have been examples where bad planning behaviour has actually created a complete hodgepodge of unsympathetic vernacular throughout St Helier, sir. The other thing that I looked at was that there was a question asked by my opponent, referencing my opponent in the London Assembly, and this was asked in 2011, sir, by Navin Shah, a member of the Assembly, to the Mayor. And the question was this, sir. He said, Sir Mark Boliak, Chair of the Housing Financial Institute, has recently called for a complete overhaul of what he calls the deeply flawed planning system, which gives far too much attention to articulate groups who make a lot of noise, was his quote. He's asking to hugely reduce influence of residents and calling for an Australian streamlined planning panels. Do you agree with these proposals for London? And the answer was that I don't believe that the planning system in London is deeply flawed, but I have to be clear that the delivery of new homes can be speeded up. So why do I mention that? Well, I think, first of all, I don't know what my opponent said, of course, because I wasn't in the room, so I can only speculate. I'm sure that he talked about his vast experience in the City of London, and also what he saw as a deeply flawed planning system, and maybe some of his plans in Jersey to fight what he calls over-regulation. There might have also been comments that the electorate were very clear during the election that they wanted to see a streamlined planning system, that there was too much red tape. Did the red tape come anywhere up during the previous speech on the bingo card? I suspect it would. And we do need to, of course, talk about the area of deregulation and appropriate regulation. But the first point I would make is that the context that we see ourselves here in Jersey is not that of the UK. So the UK has allowed itself to have quite a lot of quangos. You know, things like Ofwat, for example, don't exist in Jersey. So there are lots of powers which do fall to the Minister for Planning and Regulation now, as it is, which will need to be done in-house. So there's a completely different starting context. So there is a wider context here as well, in the sense that Jersey, I think, historically should be very proud of itself. It has always managed to achieve, certainly in recent history, and we're looking pretty much since the development of the Island Development Committee as it was then, also under the stewardship, sir, of the great and late Colin Powell, sir. He was obviously known as being one of the economic architects of Jersey, but he is somebody who did have a hand in our planning system. And what served Jersey very well is that when we get a balance between the countryside, the town, and the coastal protection, sir, all in balance and all in moderation, that's when Jersey works well. We've seen what some other islands not too far away can do in terms of ribbon development. Jersey has always managed to, I think, on the whole, through its planning system, make sure that it's got a good balance when it comes to not overdevelopment, but protecting certainly its countryside and protecting its coastline, sir. So an area that I would like to focus on, and this did come up during my election experience, is one of enforcement. So let's look at perhaps the other side of the coin to deregulation. But actually there are some very good examples of poor enforcement, sir, if that's not tautological, sir, or an oxymoron indeed. I think I can give you a couple of examples. What was coming up on the doorstep is when people flout planning law, planning enforcement, it breeds a very contempt for the system, sir. So they'll see on the one hand, and this was an actual example knocking on doors around Lemoy, I see the planning notice on a residential home, a 3-bedroom home, bulk standard but very nice in the Lemoy area. I read it, I actually took a photo of it, and they needed to put a notice up for 28 days because they want to put a pagoda up in their back garden. I had to double check what a pagoda was because I thought it was some kind of cuisine, but no, it's a type of structure you put a bit like a gazebo in your back garden. And so they're having to do that even though it's of a certain height and it's actually only really going to affect them, it's not going to affect any of the neighbours. The process has to be gone through. But only perhaps less than a mile away from where they live, we get a very high-profile example of somebody who, as they would say on the doorstep, in their own vernacular, sir, but translated into parliamentary language, we have this property owner who is taking the mickey, that there's been a structure put on the coastal area which is not allowed, and it's not being removed. It's come to the end of the 28-day period, and there are other encroachments and other enforcement issues that need to be removed. And of course, the owner says, no, I'm not removing it. It simply stays there. And so we do have this two-tier system whereby enforcement, for whatever reason, is not being done. Now, it's delicate, sir, because I know this is a live issue, but it's a live issue which has come up at the election, and I've been very careful not to name the individual or the area specifically where it is, sir. But it is a very well-known case. And I think if there is a rebalancing that needs to take place, it does fundamentally need to, of course, take into account the fact that Article 1, Protocol 1 of the human rights, both in Jersey and in Europe, sir, has a presumption that people should have enjoyment of their own properties. But it does seem to depend on who you are. So for the little person who wants to make moderate development within their own curtilage, it seems that arguably there is over-regulation there. I do wonder what would have happened if they'd have just pushed ahead with the pagoda, and I would find it very difficult to argue with somebody saying, why on earth should I try and get permission when others don't have to? After all, it's not going to be enforced. So one tangible step I would take in that area would be to say that if you have an enforcement order against you, which you haven't complied with, you cannot submit a new planning application until that enforcement order has been dealt with. That's something that I would want to bring forward, and I know how the maths are stacked here, but if that's not something that I'm able to do because I'm not in the job, I certainly hope that all of this assembly would put that pressure on the planning minister to bring that forward. The problem is I'm not convinced that is something he would do, because this, my opponent has form in actually pushing for deregulation. We heard the attributed comments to him that were raised in the London Assembly, but we also know that he's talked elsewhere about the deregulation of the taxi service, sir. And I know it's not immediately what we're talking about here today, sir, but it does seem to me that we would be putting somebody in post who has got form, both in terms of his previous political experience and his rhetoric for calling for greater deregulation. And I don't think that's something that is needed in the Jersey system wholesale, sir. I think there will be specific examples when we can do better. So, for example, and I probably do have to declare an interest here, sir, in that some of our shared property with myself and my wife, part of it is an outhouse that we've got, sir, which is for some reason a listed building, and I don't want to speak specifically about myself. It's got a low-level listing, sir. And I do think that in Jersey, there does probably need to be a general review about which buildings are listed and how they got listed. Because, of course, it's great that you can appeal a listing, but you have to do that within 28 days of the listing having been made. And it may well be that you acquire a listed building later, at which point then you've got to rely on a much more arduous process to question whether that should have been listed in the first place. And we see a very high-profile example of that, don't we, with the recent...
Sir.
Yes.
So much as I enjoy listening to the Deputy, I understood it was a 10-minute speech.
Oh, goodness gracious. Oh, is it really? Oh, thank you for drawing that to our attention. That's 3 people who should have noticed it, didn't. Well, maybe 50, but certainly 3. I apologise. Thank you for drawing that to our attention. Yes, we now move to a period of questions for the Deputy. Who wants to ask the first question? Deputy Barbara Ward.
Thank you, sir. The same question to both candidates. On reading the comment paper that we received yesterday, and it sets out the responsibilities of the 2 separated areas. However, there's an item of responsibility that fell under the previous Minister for Environment duties, which does not seem to be itemised or identified in either of the 2 proposed roles. This being the Jersey Care Commission, which was under the old system and responsibilities, and the Care Law. Will the candidate for the Minister of Planning and Regulation explain where does this health-related commission sit? And is it appropriate for care and health-related laws fall under this proposed remit? And if not, where would it be? Thank you.
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. That's a very good question. It was point 5 of my speech, which I would have probably got to in about half an hour, sir. So I apologise if I went over. I don't know if the lack of pulling me up was because everyone was so enthralled, sir, or because they were asleep, but I'll presume it's the former. It's a very good question. The regulation of care is fundamental for me. I've seen first-hand experience of the need for good care, especially for the elderly, although it's not exclusively for the elderly. And I've seen reports produced by the Care Commission where they've gone in and there have been some terrible care received in Jersey, much to the real chagrin and of the families involved, sir. So they do a great job. I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because the argument is, should it come under health? Health can't regulate themselves, but it's not health regulating themselves either. This is outsourced care, effectively. So there is a much more fundamental problem in Jersey that I think we have an over-reliance on privatisation in our elderly care, and I think that leads to a risk of profit over people, and that's why it needs to have firm and strong regulation. I don't think it's necessarily a problem with it having sat at environment previously. I do think that moving it to planning automatically with the planning and regulation does give an opportunity for it to be reviewed about where it should best sit. The bottom line is, though, so I do want to see extra funding being made available for enforcement and for regulation to be administered properly. And I imagine that might be something which sets me apart from my opponent here, sir, because I don't favour automatically, ideologically, small government. I favour right-sized government.
Supplementary?
No, sir, but I'd just like to thank the candidate for the response. Thank you.
Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. Will the candidate support the continued work of the Planning Committee, that is made up of elected states members, as part of a planning system for considering and determining matters under planning law?
Deputy.
So I think the Planning Applications Panel does a great job and in very many ways they're the unsung heroes of the system. It's a thankless task is the expression I was looking for. I'm not going to get drawn into whether I think it's the best system to have entirely elected members on the planning system, but that's the system we've got and I don't have a compelling case to change it.
Supplementary?
Thank you, sir. Very quickly, I would note that it was renamed in legislation from the Planning Applications Panel to the Planning Committee, and I would ask whether the candidate considers that it should actually be recognised for its positive work it can do, providing free recourse, and does he consider it important that there are good routes to review of applications, especially those refused by applicants, so that they can actually have an affordable way of trying to get their case through?
Deputy.
So I'm happy to do that, and it reminds me of that when the Deputy was standing for his position, I asked a question about the balance of proof, if you like. And so whilst I'm on my feet and to answer yes to that, sir, I'd also like to highlight the fact that is something I would like to look at. So actually, I think the balance of burden of proof in rejecting an application should be on the state, not on the individual. And where there is a tied vote, say if it was 2-2, I think because of the human rights implications, it's up to the state to prove that it shouldn't be built. So there could be argued that there should be a presumption in favour of building. That's something which the right of the Assembly might wish to consider as a good idea as well, and maybe vote for me to do that.
Deputy Jen.
Thank you, sir. Does the Deputy support the polluter pay principle as one that should underpin the licensing fees and enforcement approach of the Planning and Regulation Department?
Deputy.
I mean, polluter pays, I think that, we should be probably moving to an area where we think about a more holistic and comprehensive ecocide law. I think that the environment needs to be at the heart of everything we do. I just think I think there's been some very bad practice over the years, and it's difficult to know who you would identify as the pollutant. So I think it's definitely something we should look at. We've got very high nitrate levels still in Jersey. I think the conversation around nitrates has largely been forgotten. When we have a government which continually will issue derogations to its water company that it should actually be enforcing, I think that is a big problem. So I think, along with the user pays pollutants, I think government actually needs to start holding to account the utilities in a way which I think would be very uncomfortable for any minister who is doing his job, in this case, properly.
Supplementary?
I thank the Deputy for his answer and also quite detailed answer and giving some examples. I suppose the question then would he, if he was Planning and Regulation Minister, go about that within the Council of Ministers who want to cut red tape and also try to encourage economic growth, which potentially could be at the put above and beyond that issue of polluter pay principles?
Deputy. So I would just make the case that economic growth needs to be sustainable. So if we don't have a functioning agricultural system in 30 or 50 years' time, and we don't have increasing food security, then it's all at the altar of mammon, so to speak, but the public won't thank us. Ultimately, it's up to this Assembly to give its not just implied consent, but in many cases its actual consent to what government has in its programme. And if this Assembly is a deregulatory, laissez-faire, neoliberal Assembly, it will want to make sure that it has that appropriate minister in place. And part of me standing for election is to actually give the history books the opportunity to say that when perhaps some fundamental changes happened in Jersey's planning system, the Assembly knew what they were doing. They had a choice, and they had a choice between somebody, and I hope I'm wrong in this, somebody who will actually potentially be throwing the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to our planning system, because I think we've got a very balanced system at the moment, and I think we tinker with that at our peril.
Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. What will the candidate do to protect mature trees on the island, which cannot simply be replaced with new planting?
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. I don't have evidence at the moment that the current strategy when it comes to trees is flawed. I would, if there are issues, I think that we need to take a longer term view of where trees are planted and how they're maintained, sir. I think actually what is often the case is that we see historically, sometimes by accident, but sometimes deliberately, inappropriate trees have been planted in the wrong places. And of course, when they become rooted there and become very large, they can have unintended consequences. So I think we do need to have, and I would certainly want to sit down with the charity that looks after trees. It used to be called Men of the Tree, sir. I think it's called Jersey Trees for Life. Now they do a great job. I remember actually during the Great Storm of 1987, along La Route Orange, when there was a big storm and I was still in shorts, sir, probably not in October though on that day, there's some great work being done about planting, and young people, we were all involved in that, sir. So I think people do care about trees. I want to make sure that it's still proportionate and that it's a sensible policy, sir.
Supplementary?
Thank you, sir. If the candidate is elected to this role, would he agree to look at the legislation in this area with a view to strengthening protection of mature trees?
Deputy.
So I think that would be one of the potential work streams. I'd suggest that actually, rather than me as a hypothetical future minister doing that work, it might be better if the actual scrutiny panel maybe looked at it and presented something. So if indeed we can't convince the actual minister to do the work.
Deputy Porre.
Thank you, sir. If elected, how would the candidate work with other ministers and the constable to solve the current issues regarding the Victoria Marine Lake, which is presently a listed structure?
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. That's fortuitous. I think that was the issue that I was trying to address in my 11th minute of my speech, sir. And I think that it's quite fundamental. So on the one hand, I think we've got to remember that the Marine Lake was listed only a couple of years ago. And for me, that seemed like a very strange thing to do. I'm not saying it was right or wrong, but it seemed to happen in a vacuum. So first of all, and this could be given as an example, sir. So I think, why was a Marine Lake listed which needs to be protected, but the actual political question about what needs to happen to the Marine Lake wasn't solved? So it could be that the Marine Lake needs to just be removed completely, because that might be a cheaper and safer solution to what needs to be done there. But the listing, I think, potentially aggravates that. And I think that is a very good example where the planning system and the heritage aspect is not working together with what might be ultimately in the public interest. So to answer the question shortly, I think of course there needs to be some joined up working. But first of all, if there's no money available and there's no money available to maintain it as a listed structure, I think the first question might be to look at delisting it and then having a question about what to do with it. But that won't be popular with everyone.
Supplementary? Deputy Alves.
Thank you, sir. And I'm going to ask the same question I asked the last candidate, which is, what is the candidate's view on maintaining public access to our coastlines? Thank you, sir.
Deputy.
So I think it's vital. I think we know that the public feel very strongly about the coastline. I remember the first line in the sand. I remember the second line in the sand. And I remember a couple of years ago when I organised and kindly some of my local deputies assisted with that there was also a strong feeling about what was going on at Le Bray and around that area. People do come out to show their support for the coastline. The Chief Minister now actually, of course, I don't think he was Chief Minister at the time, he may have been, he brought the Grève de Lec acquisition and it was co-funded through the National Trust. I think the public are very savvy and when it comes to this issue, and I think we need to listen to the public actually on that issue.
Supplementary?
Thank you, sir. And what strategies or how does he think he would help protect any challenges that there might be to this? Thank you, sir.
Deputy.
Again, I refer to a previous answer that we need to, first of all, enforce good practice in Jersey, and where there are examples of that being flouted, it needs to be enforced properly so that people will respect the decisions, not just in word, but the fact that we value our coastline in practice. And that I think we need to continue to value the work that's done by third sector organisations. You know, the coastal network that we have of cliff paths, of steps, don't happen by chance. They're done in large parts by groups like the National Trust, and they're a big economic driver as well as providing things for our local community to do so. So I think it's a real balance, and I think there's already an economic balance and benefit in Jersey when we do things properly through a balanced planning system that we take for granted, so, and we perhaps shouldn't do.
Deputy Lee.
Thank you, sir. This is the same question that I asked the other candidate. Will the candidate consider making safe school routes and safe school access a material planning consideration in the New Island Plan?
Deputy.
Thanks, sir. I think there are already some safeguards around that, and I think those are considerations. There's also the opportunity to do these things through planning gains, of course, so that may also be appropriate. But ultimately, yes, is the answer. We need to make sure that those powers are only strengthened and that they are always at the forefront. I'm a big supporter of things like the 20-minute village, I think it's called, safe routes for walking and cycling, and they need to be joined up ultimately. There's no point in having a partial cycle network if there are certain areas of road which are very dangerous, and young families in particular, or the elderly don't wish to traverse because they can't get there. So we have to do all that we can. It's not entirely the job for the planning minister, but the minister will need to work in a joined up way with his ministerial colleagues.
Supplementary?
I think the candidate has already kind of like briefed his opinions on that. My question is, can he assure the parents in St Helens North that as a minister, children and young people walking to the school would come first in every planning decision?
So I can advise that I would want due consideration to be given to what the deputy is asking, and I think the issue is, of course, there are a multitude of considerations that need to be taken into account. And if somebody's been elected on cutting red tape and actually prioritising economic gain, as opposed to necessarily doing what's best for the local community where there might be tensions there, then I think ultimately people get what they're voted for.
Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. The candidate referred to evidence presented in the UK Parliament by his opponent in this process. Looking at that evidence, his opponent refers to inherent tensions between local planning and strategic planning decisions. What will be his approach when it comes to brokering solutions in this scenario in the interest of supporting economic growth and protecting our heritage and environment?
Deputy.
Thanks. So I'm glad for the opportunity because I did refer to that. What struck me and worries me is that there was this reference to articulate groups who make a lot of noise having too much influence on the planning system. And I think that's actually, if that is a correct attribution, sir, of what the member is quoted to have said, I think that's very dismissive, first of all, of those types of groups. We're talking about groups like the National Trust. We're talking about groups like Save Our Shoreline, Friends of the Earth, all of whom, and there'll be local community groups, of course, which may be on a constituency basis, which all have a very direct interest and they care about the island holistically, sir. And so, I don't know if this is the point to mention it, but I would certainly want to protect the third-party appeals mechanism and system. I think it's vitally important in Jersey that the third-party appeal system exists, that it's proportionate, because we live often cheek by jowl in Jersey, and we don't have the vast swathes of land where, people can be protected from the worst vagaries of bad planning decisions, sir. So I don't know if that answers the member's question, but happy to take a supplementary.
Supplementary?
Sir, from a system that can sometimes appear process-led to one that is more focused on enabling sustainable development and economic growth, what are his particular views on how this can be improved?
Deputy.
So I think we've already seen the development and the evolution of pre-planning advice being given. I think that's much better than it used to be in the past. And I think that's a system which initially can provide written or verbal feedback. And I think once people fully realise how that can be used, I think that can be developed, and I think the more work that can be done at an earlier stage. I mean, I'll give one example. Again, it was in Lemoy. I had somebody who is an architect. I came across him, and he actually had a really fruitful experience of dealing with the planning department, where traditionally others have said, I find it really difficult, and this was somebody who works in the area of historic buildings. He just had a really refreshing way of looking at it, that he didn't see the planning department as an enemy, he saw them as somebody to be worked with. And I think if that mentality is shared on both sides, and sadly it isn't always the case, where there's proportionate regulation but also conversations can happen, I think that's where we get the best out of our planning system.
Conrad Tarbell and Clement.
Thank you, sir. The same question to the second candidate. What would the future be for our derelict and dangerous greenhouses under your direction?
Deputy.
So there was a vote that took place in 2022, early brought by then Deputy Moore, which didn't pass. Essentially, we need to use the powers that we have. So whether it's a broken wall that I've seen in St Brelard for the last 10 to 15 years not being fixed, or a derelict greenhouse, there are currently provisions in the law which allows the minister, or it's delegated, I think, to his chief officer, to enforce that. So you go to the landowner and say you can either put those back into use and build them again as greenhouses, because there are people in the community who would quite happily take on an allotment greenhouse, or you return them to as they were. Sometimes, in many cases, these farmers might have received subsidies to actually help construct that. That's taxpayers' money going to these dilapidated greenhouses. And there's a quote, I think, from Deputy Ash, during the debate, where he said that if, I don't know if I can read it out actually, but he talked about the fact that this would encourage bad practice, sir. There's also quotes from Senator Ferguson. So Deputy Ash said that this will lead to more development in St Clement's by the back door. He says part of government should be to drive good behaviours, and this does nothing to drive good behaviours. It effectively says let your greenhouse get into a terrible state and then cash into the tune of several £1 million. Former Deputy of St Clement's, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. That's 20 minutes brought to an end. Thank you, Deputy. Could someone locate Senator Boliat before we move to the vote? So members are asked to return to their seats. Any member wishing to vote for Senator Boliat should press the pour button. Any member wishing to vote for Deputy Taddeo should press the contre button. Members may abstain in the usual way if they wish. I ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. The outcome of the vote is 37 votes for Senator Boliat, 7 votes for Deputy Tadier, and 2 abstentions. I can therefore announce that Senator Boliat has been appointed Minister for Planning and Regulation.
So
Yes,
can I
sir.
congratulate the Senator and ask for the 7 and the 2, please? I know 6 of them already.
Yes.
Those voting for, Deputies Tadier, Doublé, Alves, Coles, Feltham, Porre and Carpenter. And the 2 abstentions were Deputy Alex Curtis and Deputy Jeune.
Now on to the appointment of the President of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee. Understanding Order 121, the Assembly is due to appoint a President of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee. I invite members to make nominations for the President of the Committee from amongst the chairs of the Scrutiny Panels and the Public Accounts Committee. Deputy Jeune.
Thank you, sir. I would like to nominate Deputy Wilson as President for Scrutiny Liaison Committee.
Thank you. Is that nomination seconded? Yes. Are there any other nominations? Accordingly, I invite Deputy Wilson to address the Assembly for up to 10 minutes, following which there'll be a period of questions for up to 20 minutes. Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. I'll keep it brief. For me, scrutiny is the complete and total control mechanism in the Assembly. And one of the things that I would like to do through the presidency is to make sure that what we will do is have a higher standard to the scrutiny process that will enable ministers to do their work well. For me, one of the things that is critical is the relationship between ministers and the panels. And in that regard, understanding the agenda between us and agreeing on the way in which we work together will be critical. There are 5 very capable leaders of each of the scrutiny panels, and I don't underestimate the task of trying to coordinate the ambition and the purpose behind each of those panels. But one of the things I can assure the Assembly is that we will be measured and we will be considered in the way that we approach our work, and that we will conduct ourselves in a professional way. One of the things that I think is really important to call upon is the need for mutual respect in terms of ministers' ambitions for delivery, but also the respect that is given to the scrutiny process, so that the public feel that they can trust the way in which the Assembly works. I'd also like to, on this occasion, say that there has been a really good balance in terms of the way in which the members have put themselves forward for leading each of those panels. So I hope the Assembly will benefit from the richness of the difference and the diversity of what we have in terms of contribution. One of the key areas that we will need to address immediately is the legacy report that was previously undertaken by the previous SLC, and we are in the process at the moment of trying to come together as an SLC to agree that work programme and undertake the timeframe for delivery around that. I can assure you that as an SLC we will also be good communicators of what it is we want to achieve, and we will widen our scrutiny process to make sure that there is good representation from the public in all of the work that we do on our scrutiny panels. And I would also like to express my thanks to my panel members for the confidence and the trust they have placed in me to carry out this significant leadership role. So thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Wilson. Are there any questions for Deputy Wilson? Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. Sir, can I just preface it by saying that thanking the Deputy for being an excellent Vice Chair on my scrutiny panel over the last term. And the question I have relating to that, sir, is what experience has she learned from that role that she will put into good practice when it comes to leading SLC?
Deputy Wilson.
Thank you. And I think I was able to fulfil my role as a vice chair because I had a good chair. So thank you for that. What I've learned is that preparation is everything. In actual fact, I had a conversation with the Chief Executive yesterday in relation to PAC. And one of the things that we have agreed is that in order to raise the bar and raise the standard of the way in which the Public Accounts Committee will operate will be to improve on that communication and to also prepare well. We talked about the fact that very often papers, propositions, laws were delivered late, and that put an enormous pressure on the scrutiny panels to have to do the work. And I think if we're going to be candid, that we've had a debate this morning about that very thing. So for me, the most important thing is to make sure that we can actually respect the process. They're there for a reason. The other thing is that the makeup of the panels, I think, is going to be critical. And I know panel chairs have been able to harness the support of lots of Assembly members from different areas. And I think, again, that's another learning point, is to keep them apolitical, to bring all of the talents to the panels, to focus on the issues. Clearly, politics will play a part in between, but we must never lose sight of the fact that we're here to serve. We are here for the purpose of the public. They are the voice, or we are their voice. And when I talk about respect, I talk about the need to respect that public voice. And that's what I've learned through the scrutiny process so far, that there have been some issues with that as we've gone forward. I would clearly like to work with colleagues to raise the standard on that so that we can have trust and confidence not only in the government but also in the scrutiny process itself.
Parliamentary. Deputy Dublé.
Thank you, sir. Would the candidate detail how she would continue to innovate within scrutiny, as scrutiny has become, I think, increasingly creative and innovative and inclusive over the years, and with things such as review panels, co-opting members for specific reviews, holding single issue hearings, etc. Would she try to carry on those things and embed them, and has she got any new ideas for what she might do?
Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. Yes, I would want to continue to make more progress on the best of what we've done already. We haven't really had a proper debate on the way in which artificial intelligence will actually inform the scrutiny process. But we have got capability there that will allow us to refine and focus our scrutiny so that it is actually using the evidence and the intelligence rather than just rely also on opinion. So they're the kinds of things. I would also like to see more public engagement in the scrutiny panels and the scrutiny process. And I would like to spend more time talking to the general public in the form of community meetings or whatever out in the community, to be able to engage information from the public before scrutiny actually concludes its work. So to actually use that mechanism for informing people a lot more robustly than what we've done at the moment. I think we have to move away from transaction. We've got to focus on outcomes. And one of the other things that I think is important is to maybe work with the panels and explore ways in which we can ask more strategically focused questions that will actually, again, allow us to have much more strategic debate in the Assembly as a result of that scrutiny process.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for her answer. I'm also interested in what kind of direction she would give to the other chairs in terms of following up on previous reviews, especially where there might not be that corporate memory if it's a new member. And one of the reviews I'm thinking of is the family-friendly review, which we worked on together, but of course there are many others.
Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. I mean, as an SLC, I think we're going to have to prioritise our work. We're going to have to look across all of the scrutiny programmes of work to see where there are common themes, where we can avoid duplication of efforts, where we can work with joint panels, cross panels, and we've already had a conversation around the corporate services panel in terms of how we might approach the common strategic policy. I think there are really good examples like that we could use to actually build upon. But for me, it's really about being collegiate and having that strategic intention focused on outcomes rather than tactical activity all of the time.
Deputy Morrell.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to ask the Deputy a question that I asked of scrutiny members a couple of weeks ago, but from the perspective of scrutiny panels and their budget and having control of their budgets, does the Deputy have any thoughts about whether the politicians on scrutiny should have greater control over those budgets, or does she think that the current situations work perfectly well?
Deputy Wilson.
I think the Deputy will know that I'm always looking for improvement in some of the ways in which we do things. I think if we're going to have more cross-governmental approach to the way in which we scrutinise, then that gives us an opportunity to look at how we use money. And I am aware, in relation to Deputy Tadier's question before, that it's been a bit of a bun fight for money in relation to review processes. So I think the design of our review process, I think, gives us an opportunity to think about how we might spend money differently and allocate money differently. I think to ring fence it, I don't think you get the value out of it in the way that we've seen.
Supplementary?
I thank the Deputy for her answer. Would the Deputy agree with the statement that scrutiny politicians should be the people in charge of the scrutiny budgets?
Deputy Wilson.
That's a very interesting question, and to be quite honest, I want to give that some more thought. I think if you're in charge of delivery, which again scrutiny will be, then it would follow that I think if there is a resource allocated to that, that you also have to account for the way in which you make your decisions about how you're going to scrutinise. But I also think that there is a conversation to be had as to whether the public feel that that money is best spent. And that's why I think, I don't think we should get into a scenario whereby we become quite insular in terms of our focus around how we spend our scrutiny money to do the reviews that we will be doing, but that we open that to a much more consultative, engaging way so that we can actually make sure that we are delivering value for money.
Are there any more questions for Deputy Wilson? If not, then I can announce that Deputy Wilson has been appointed as President of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee. In accordance with Standing Order 122, the Assembly is due to appoint members of the Privileges and Procedures Committee. I invite the Chair, Deputy Alves, to make 3 nominations from elected members who are not ministers or assistant ministers. Deputy Alves.
Thank you, sir. And I'd like to nominate Deputy Louise Doublé, Deputy Tom Coles, and the Constable of St John, Andy Gia. Thank you.
Thank you. Are those nominations seconded? Are there any other nominations? If there are no other nominations, then I declare that Deputy Doublé, Deputy Coles and the Constable of St John are appointed members of PPC. In accordance with Standing Order 1225, I invite the Chair of PPC to nominate a further 2 members from the Ministers and Assistant Ministers to PPC.
Thank you, sir. After consultation with the Chief Minister, I would like to nominate Senator Serena Kirsten and Deputy Kirsten Morel.
Thank you very much. Are those nominations seconded?
Yes, sir.
Are there any other nominations? In that case, I can announce that Senator Kirsten and Deputy Morel have been elected as members of PPC. We'll now move on to the appointment of members of the Public Accounts Committee in accordance with Standing Order 123.
Sorry, sir.
Yes, Deputy Alves.
We need the SLC rep as well.
Have I skipped something? I do apologise. Yes, I have. I invite the Chair of PPC to nominate a further member from amongst the membership of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee. Yes.
Thank you, sir. And I'd like to nominate Deputy Karen Wilson. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that nomination seconded? Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Accordingly, I declare that Deputy Wilson is appointed a member of PPC. Now move on to Standing Order 123, members of the Public Accounts Committee who are elected members. Standing Order 124 deals with unelected members appointed for the Public Accounts Committee, which requires notice to be given 14 days before the meeting of the persons to be nominated, which therefore cannot happen at this meeting. But under Standing Order 1231, I invite Deputy Wilson to make her nominations for membership of the Public Accounts Committee. Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. It gives me great pleasure to nominate Constable Troy, Deputy Carpenter and Deputy Lee as members of the panel.
Are there any other nominations? In that case, I declare that the Conotab of St Clement, Deputy Carpenter and Deputy Lee are appointed as members of the Public Accounts Committee. In accordance with Standing Order 125, the Assembly is due to appoint members of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel. In accordance with Standing Order 1251, I invite the Chair, Deputy Feltham, to indicate the number of members she is seeking for the panel. The maximum is 5. How many members are you seeking, Deputy Feltham?
That will be 4 members.
4 members.
Plus myself, of course.
Thank you. I invite you to make your nominations.
Thank you, sir. I nominate Deputy Leck, Deputy Rebendane, Deputy Carpenter and Deputy Jearn.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations seconded? Thank you. Are there any other nominations? In that case, I declare that Deputy Leck, Deputy Rebendane, Deputy Carpenter and Deputy Jearn have been appointed as members of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel. And I'll move on to members of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel. In accordance with Standing Order 1251, I invite the Chair, Deputy Gleave of the panel, to indicate the number of members she is seeking for that panel.
4, sir.
Thank you. And can I please have your nominations?
Yes, sir. I'd like to propose Deputy Rebendane, Conotab Johnston, Deputy Leck and Deputy Raimondo.
So that was Deputy Rebendane, the Conotab of St Mary, Deputy Raimondo. Who was the 4th one?
Deputy Leck.
Deputy Leck. Yes. Those nominations seconded? Yes, sir. Are there any other nominations? Accordingly, I declare Deputy Rebendane, the Conotab of St Mary, Deputy Leck and Deputy Raimondo appointed as members of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel. I move on to the Children, Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel. In accordance with Standing Order 125, I invite the Chair, Deputy Lee, to indicate the number of members she is seeking for that panel.
4, thank you, sir.
4. Please, may I have your nominations?
I would like to nominate the following members: Constable Labby, Constable Palmer,
Sorry, forgive me, can you give me their names and their titles? Sorry.
Constable Labby,
Constable of Greville. Yes?
a Constable of St Lawrence, Tina Palmer,
Yes.
Constable of St Saviour, David Curtis,
Yes, just use their titles, Constable of St Saviour, St Lawrence and so on.
and Deputy Rebendane.
Deputy Reverend Day. Thank you very
Thank you,
much. Are those nominations seconded? Are there any other nominations? Accordingly, I declare that the Constable of Greville, the Constable of St Lawrence, the Constable of St Saviour and Deputy Reverend Dane are appointed as members of the Children, Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel. We now move on to members of the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel. In accordance with Standing Order 125, I invite the Chair, Deputy Jern, to indicate the number of members she is seeking for this panel.
4, sir.
Thank you. Deputy Jern, please make your nominations.
Yes, I'd like to nominate Constable of St Saviour's, Deputy Coles, Deputy Curtis and Deputy Maltman.
Which, Deputy Alex Curtis, yes?
Yes, sorry, yes.
Deputy Coles, and who was the last one?
Deputy Maltman, Arlene
Yes.
Maltman.
Very much. And are those nominations seconded? Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Accordingly, I declare that Deputy Coles, the Constable of St Saviour, Deputy Alex Curtis and Deputy Maltman are duly appointed to membership of that panel. I move on to membership of the Health and Social Security Scrutiny Panel. I invite the Chair, Deputy Porre, to indicate the number of members she is seeking for this panel.
Thank you, sir. I'm currently seeking 3 panel members.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. So the names are Deputy Carpenter, Deputy Raimondo, and Deputy Leck. Thank you, sir.
The last one's Deputy Leck, was it?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are those nominations seconded? Yes, sir. Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Accordingly, I can declare that Deputy Carpenter, Deputy Raimondo and Deputy Leck are appointed as members of the Health and Social Security Scrutiny Panel. I'll move on to membership of the Planning Committee. I invite the Chair, Deputy Alex Curtis, to indicate the number of members he is seeking for this committee.
Thank you, sir. Today I'm proposing 8 members, and they are Deputy Coles, the Constable of Greville.
Got to be a bit slow if I'm going to write all this down.
I thought you might want it to be slower. I've got 8.
I'm struggling
Where
to keep
are you
up.
at? Sir?
Yes. Deputy Coles, Constable of Greville.
The Constable of St Juan.
Yeah.
Deputy Maltman. The Constable of St John. Deputy Gleave. The Constable of St Brelard. And the Constable of St Martin.
Right. There we are. Are the nominations seconded? Yes, sir. Are there any other nominations? Accordingly, I declare that Deputy Coles, the Constable of Greville, the Constable of St Juan, Deputy Maltman, the Constable of St John, Deputy Gleave, the Constable of St Brelard and the Constable of St Martin are elected for membership of the Planning Committee. In accordance with Standing Order 126, the Assembly is due to appoint 2 States Commissioners of the Jersey Overseas Aid Commission. And an understanding order 126, I invite the Chair, Deputy Labby, of the Commission to make her nominations.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to nominate Senator Mary Lahegara and Deputy Arlene Maltman.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations?
Sir,
yes.
I'd like to propose the Constable of St Martin's.
Need to do this separately, won't I? The procedure is slightly different for these elections. Each, so it's separate, isn't it? Separate on each. Well, there's no suggestion that it's secret, is it? So it needs to be what's using the recognised board. The procedure for these elections is different from the standing orders that apply to the election of the other panels. This procedure is set out in Standing Order 126, and it provides that I shall invite the chair of the Commission to propose 2 elected members that he or she recommends, and then the state shall decide whether to appoint each of the elected members that have been proposed. There is no provision in this standing order for there to be nominations of other members, and there's simply a separate vote on each proposed candidate. It's simply different from the other procedures that apply to these scrutiny panels. It doesn't indicate that whether the vote should be secret or public, so we'll assume it's a public vote. And I think in the circumstances, the appropriate way for me to proceed is simply to have a separate vote on the 2 members who have been proposed by the chair of by the chair under of the Jersey Overseas.
So
Aid
before we
Commission.
move to the vote, I'm wondering if we could propose the adjournment. It might also give you time to consider, because I'm wondering whether it's the interpretation, that the presumption that it would be an open vote rather than a secret vote. As I understand it, the votes used to be in secret.
Yes.
Until there were propositions brought to make them public, and because
That's
nothing's
right.
been brought in this case, the assumption should be made that they remain secret, I would have thought.
Yes.
Despite the fact that I like as much openness and honesty as possible,
No,
sir.
I'm happy to reflect on it. We were just going so quickly. I wasn't expecting to reach this stage until this afternoon. But yes, I'm happy to look at Standing Order 126 over the adjournment. If members are content to adjourn now, we'll adjourn until 2:15. 2:15.